The most important person in the room is not the athletes. It's the coach. Because if the coach is not successful, the kids have no chance of being successful. I was constantly preaching confidence through preparation. You've got to remember your training, how hard we work, how hard you win at practice. Remember these things going into competition.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. All right, Michael Brinson, welcome to the podcast. I've kind of killed the whole introduction thing because people can just read the description. But in short, you've been a coach for well over a decade, collegiate level, high school level,
right,
military as well. And as I never like to use the term research because research is different than me looking you up.
Right.
So but as I was looking you up and I was watching other podcasts and so forth, it was a little frustrating to me because you've been powerlifting for like 10 years and you're a meathead, but nobody's acknowledging the fact that you're a meathead,
right,
and that you do this powerlifting thing. So I'm jumping off with that,
okay,
right? Because the coaching thing's the coaching thing,
right,
but that usually stems from the meathead inside of the person, from their soul.
Right.
It's like your soul ends up moving to your head, right? And it can be a problem later because then you're in your head too much. But back in there, and you played ball as well.
Right.
So the question that I always have is with the meathead side, right? And then the athletic side, it's like a balance, right? And for the ones that are just pure powerlifters, powerlifting was always the first priority. I'm going to guess that wasn't the case, that you started training for football.
Right.
And I'm always curious in this, and this is kind of like a little bit of a side topic, with just your athletic development, because you do work with younger kids now. With the athletic development, so much of those attributes are developed before we're even teenagers. So I'm always curious as to what somebody who played at a high level, what their childhood looked like as far as sport goes, right? So I think endurance is developed very, very young. Explosive strength is in this other window. What were you doing?
So I didn't actually start playing tackle football till the 7th grade. I had played flag football a couple years prior to that, and then...
Yeah, but can we make the argument that could be better?
Yeah,
because you see the hips.
Yeah, and you see now when kids start playing tackle football in 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, by the time they get to high school, they're completely burned out on it. And so I think it was beneficial just from a mental standpoint for me to wait until the 7th grade to really start that part of my journey.
See, I've always heard that was better because it forces the athlete to watch the direction of the hips, instead of where they can be faked, and I didn't know if I always buy that or not. Yeah. But, now it's better for other reasons. They're not knocking their heads, and shit like that. Yeah. So anyhow, what were you doing before that though?
So I played soccer growing up. At whatever age you can start playing soccer, I may have been 4 or 5 years old. I don't know. So I was running around constantly, whole childhood. I was outside playing, riding bikes, whatever. But I didn't start anything organized in a weight room until summer before my 7th grade year. I can remember the first day in the weight room like it was yesterday. I was hooked immediately, but prior to that, for as far back as I can remember, I wanted to be big and strong. I was a tall, skinny kid growing up. When I was in the 7th grade, I was 6'1" and some change. I was 125 pounds. I was really thin, really skinny, and I wanted to change that. I wanted to be big, strong, powerful. I didn't know how to do that, but I knew at some point I wanted to change that, and that really, didn't come into fruition until I was able to get into a weight room.
How is the training structured?
So one of our assistant coaches ran the weight. He was the JV or the 7th grade head coach and one of the assistant varsity coaches. I think he was the offensive or defensive line. And we had basically every couple of years we had somebody else take the weight room over. So it changed year to year, season to season pretty drastically. Starting out, because I went to a really small school, the 7th and 8th and 9th graders were in there with the high school guys. So it was all just one big group. So there wasn't a separate JV program, separate varsity program. Everybody did the same thing. And we had an upper body day, we had a lower body day, then we had a total body day that was more of like a circuit. So we would do, stations in the weight room, every machine we had, a couple different barbell movements, whatever. We didn't, there wasn't any, introductory phase with the younger kids. It was day one. We're testing, we're maxing out something. I think we maxed out like leg press or something the first day I was in there. And then the second day we maxed out bench. And then the third day, I think we did like trap bar deadlift or something. So they did the best that they could, being football coaches running the weight room. It wasn't, as organized as it should have been, but I mean, they did the best job that they could.
I'm laughing to myself because when I was in high school and they had the little testing thing, I was already powerlifting.
Right.
And the leg press was one of the stupid things that they tested, which was, it wasn't even like a real leg press. It was like one of the universal ones that you kind of had to cram yourself into, and which was fine. But the preacher curl was another one. And the whole time I'm like, wow, like what? And then the other one was like the seated universal press. And it was when they didn't have like backs on them. It was just a bench. You just sat on this bench and you had to press this machine up. And fortunately, because I already had strength, I kind of tested out of everything.
Right.
So it was like I just smoked everything, and they're like, okay, cool, you can keep training with the older guys you're training with. But with the preacher curl, it just reminded me of that. And I'm thinking, how stupid was that? Like, where'd that come from?
Right.
It's like, because even if you go back that far, there wasn't like protocols for testing that on a preacher curl. At what point did you see that there was, and I know it's tough because you're young, but did you see that there was correspondence with what you were doing in the weight room to play?
So early on, maybe in 7th grade, maybe in 8th grade, but definitely the rest of my high school career, there was a very direct correlation in my head with the bigger and stronger I got, the better I was going to be on the football field. And the more training that I did, the better I was going to be on the field, because everything to me was about football. I didn't realize at the time that I loved to train more than I loved the game of football. But everything was about getting bigger, getting stronger, getting faster for the game. And so I took it upon myself, I've got to do more outside of here. So I was just training around the clock. That 7th grade summer for my birthday, I got one of those little standard 1-inch barbells for my birthday, and I was in the living room, knocking out curls and rows and presses or whatever. And then eventually I got one of those like really cheap benches that has the leg extension, leg curl, and has the built-in pec fly arms. And I was, doing chest flies and bench and leg extension, leg curl every single day. And then eventually, I think it would have been right around 9th grade year, I asked everybody who was going to be getting me, it was either for birthday or for Christmas, everyone who was going to be getting me a gift, instead of getting me a gift, just pool your money together because I need a rack. And I got a rack for that birthday or Christmas, and I had weights and everything. And so I would train at school either in the morning or our athletic period, and then I would come home that night and I would train again. And so because I knew I need to get bigger, I need to get stronger. Because again, this goes back to when I was younger, I didn't want to be a small, skinny kid anymore. I wanted to be big. I wanted to look strong, And so in my head, the more I train, the better the chance of changing that is going to be. And I knew going to a small school, if I want to go play at the next level, I've got to stand out visually, because we're not going to have scouts just flocking to our school to watch a Friday night just because. I've got to give them a reason to be there, and I've got to go to camps. I've visually got to stand out before we even do anything on the field. And so there was it happened pretty quick. There was a really strong relationship in my head between training and performance on the field.
All right, this is a little bit of a tricky question, but you may even see it with some of the kids you have now, because I think your wife works with a junior high. Is that right?
She is a 2nd grade teacher.
Okay. Where when you're 7, 8, and 9th grade, and You start training, you get the beginner gains, right? So let's set that aside. So whatever that strength is, like those beginner gains, how did that strength compare to the other people that you were playing with, that you were bidding for positions against? Was it higher, or was it about the same as where they were?
Oh no, it blew them out of the water.
Okay, so it blew them out. This is where I'm going to go with this one, because it can pertain to the kids you're working with now. That can be a blessing and a curse, right? Because it's, in my case, when I was that age, I was just so much stronger than everybody else. If it was wrestling or football, I just threw them the fuck around.
Right.
It really didn't make any difference. It wasn't until later to where they matured, they got stronger. Their technique was better, I guess is where I'm going. Because when you're that strong, if the coaches are not on to it, when you're that strong, it's easy to just let them go and do what they're going to do, but they don't develop the basic skills of the sport that by the time you're in 10th or 11th grade should start to be automatic. But for that strong guy, a lot of times they're going to get beat out by somebody that's not as strong because they have the skills. So where were your skills? Did you fall into that category?
Yeah, definitely. It didn't come into play really until I got to college. But I basically didn't know how to play football. I was a defensive lineman. I was kind of in a weird spot because I was a running back and I was a defensive lineman. Our offensive line for a small school was huge. We were almost 300 pounds, all 5 guys across the board. And in middle school, I was a running back because I was fast, I was tall, I was athletic, and I wasn't filled out. I wasn't very big. And as I went through high school and started putting weight on, I just stayed at running back because that was the position I'd always played. And so my senior year, I was 250 pounds playing running back. And, but I was a defensive lineman on the other side, and I had no idea how to play defensive line. I didn't know, what a down block was, what a reach block. I didn't know you were supposed to be reading the offensive lineman who was come off the ball, hit the guy as hard as you can, see the ball, go get the ball. I mean, that was what I did. And I got away with it because I was 6'3", 250. I ran a 4.7, and I was really strong.
Well, half the time you'll be in the right gap.
Right. And so that worked for me. But then I get to college, and all of a sudden, everyone knows how to play football. You're not the strongest guy anymore. You're definitely not the biggest guy anymore. And it was like, whoa, I don't really know how to play football. So it didn't catch me until I got to the next level. Now, if I'd gone to a bigger high school, maybe it would have happened a little earlier. But it's tough because looking back, if I hadn't spent as much time in the weight room and training and a little bit more time on skill development, would I have been better?
Yeah.
Fundamentally as a football player, sure, but also I wouldn't have been as physically developed as I was. Maybe I don't go, to the next level.
So how do you approach that now as a coach, seeing kids in that situation? Because like I said, it's dicey.
It is.
Right? For the reasons that you just said.
Right.
But it's going to catch up.
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, because you've been in the D1 level and you've seen players at the D1 level, given the two scenarios, the skill is always going to weigh more. I hate to say it because we're fucking meatheads.
I think it depends on position, because there's some positions that the physical requirements, if you're not there, you can't play. Like offensive and defensive line. If you're just too small and weak, it doesn't matter how skilled you are, you're never going to contribute. On the back end and the secondary receivers, if you're a at the power 4, power 5 level, whatever they're calling it these days, and you're a 4.8 guy, you better be the most skilled guy on the team at your position, or you're never going to sniff the field. So,
but the weight room is going to contribute to their durability.
Yes. And now in my setting, it's we train so much and so hard and so intense compared to like what I was doing, that there's not a lot of room for them to go do something outside on their own. Now, it still happens, and I try to educate them as best I can on what they need to do outside of here if they want to train, because you're still going to have the guys who are like me, who are like you, who are going to go do stuff outside of the required work. And so you try to educate them on, like, look, if we have a lower body day coming up tomorrow, we don't need to go to the gym and squat the night before. But we're fortunate, and it's a big school. We have a lot of football coaches. We have really skilled football coaches. So the skill development stuff, outside of football season, it's there if they want it. Like our head coach is a defensive guy. He coaches linebackers. He does position drills with a couple of the linebackers 3 or 4 days a week, year round. So the skill development is happening. And I think it's a little different now compared to when it was when I was in high school, or even earlier than that, in that there's so much information out there on football skill development that there's really not an excuse for somebody not to know what to do.
That makes sense.
And just to be honest, there's so many trainers, and I say that in quotes, who are out there doing, like O-line, D-line training or receiver training, whatever, that there are resources available if you want to work on the football side of things, especially if you want to pay for it, but at the college level, you will see it more so than I see it now, where you've got the guys who are the meatheads who just want to live in the weight room, and you see it when we do the stuff on the field, the movement training. They're just not as bought in or invested in it, or even at practice. They're just get me to team. I don't care as much about the ND or the group or whatever. Get me to team. That's when I want to do things. And it's like, well, you're, this percentile on the team in terms of strength and size, whatever, but you're never playing. Some of your attention on your own time needs to be on the film. It needs to be meeting with your coach. It needs to be on, drill work, ND on your own, whatever, because there is a gap here.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. There's a gap on each side, right? So you'll have the guys that really didn't have to do a whole lot,
right?
That then have to do that, and then vice versa. I think that's where the term a complete player,
right,
actually comes from. And I would guess they're more rare in high school, right? And they're developed in college,
right?
And then if they make it to the pros, they're a complete player. I don't think very many people are making it to the pros that aren't complete players, or they wouldn't be to that level. When did powerlifting come into the whole fray?
So I was thinking about this on the way up here. At some point in early middle school, maybe in 7th grade, maybe in 8th grade, I was, like I said, I was obsessed with training because I knew, I was on a mission to change who I was physically. So I was looking for any resource possible to point me in the right direction. And one day I was on the internet and I just typed in football workouts or strength training for football, something along those lines. And I actually found EliteFTS and went on there, and I had no idea what powerlifting was, never even heard of it before this. And I just see these enormous people lifting crazy weights. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, right there, that's what I want to do. This is exactly what I want to do. It's not just about being big, but it's also about being strong, and it's exhibiting the work that you have done. And so I started reading and watching videos and everything, and I didn't know what anything was. When it was taught in the training logs, it was talking about, we're going to squat with straps down this week, or, we're going to wear our briefs, or we're going to touch to a one board. You may as well have been speaking a different language to me. I didn't know what any of that was, but.
Was this when we had the training logs?
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, did you not read like Buddy Morris's training log and some of the other coaches or you were just gravitating towards the strongest dudes?
I think I was gravitating towards the strongest guys.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
But I knew once I was done playing football, that's what I wanted to do. Because I thought, I could be pretty good at it, because whatever age I was, and as I went through high school, I was always the strongest guy on the team. And I thought, I may be pretty good at this because I'm not even training for this, and I'm still decently strong on the barbell lifts. And but I knew at that point, training for powerlifting and training to be a football player were two different things. And I knew it had to wait until I was done playing football. And so, when you were talking earlier about, the coaching career and the powerlifting career, both of those things kind of kicked off at the same exact time for me. Because when I got done playing and went into coaching, I was in a meet 6 months later, and I've been competing in powerlifting as long as I've been coaching.
Over a decade.
And, those two things are one and the same to me. It's not, I can't imagine one without the other. So
when you were in college, did you want to be a coach? Is that where you saw yourself?
Yeah, I knew I wanted to coach in middle school. I wanted to be a football coach in middle school because I recognized that coaching was a noble profession. The development of young people is a calling, and it's an important job. Coaches are really important to me, and I really respected them, and I wanted to do the same. I didn't really know what strength and conditioning was. When I started going on visits, I would see, because you go around campus, and the weight room is one of the places you stop, and strength coaches would talk to you, but I didn't really know what that looked like on a day-to-day basis, but I knew I wanted to coach something. So when I got to Southern Miss as a freshman, we got thrown in with the rest of the team for the run groups, and we were in our own group as freshmen for about a week and a half in the weight room. And I was maybe 3 sessions in to training and went up to our head strength coach at the time, Paul Jackson, who in my opinion is one of the best in the industry. I went right up to him as soon as the session was over, and I said, I want to do what you do for a living. What did you study in college? What do I need to do to get that done?
Staying hydrated is huge for training and performance. And this is why today's episode is brought to you by Element. Element gives you exactly what your body needs: 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams of potassium, 60 milligrams of magnesium, 0 sugar, and no junk. Personally, I like to mix half a pack with my morning oatmeal. I'll use any of the chocolate flavors. I drink it with all my training sessions, watermelon being my favorite. Some other reasons why I use it is stable energy with no crash. It fights off fatigue and cramps, improves mental focus and clarity, helps regulate stress, and supports deeper sleep. And there's no sugar and garbage. Here's the best part. You can try it totally risk-free. Right now, Element is offering a free 8-count sample pack of its most popular flavors. With each purchase, you get 2 of each of these 4 fan favorites, perfect for finding your own favorite or sharing with a friend. Don't like it? Give it to a salty friend, and Element will give you your money back. Head over to www.drinklmnt.com/table talk.
And he told me I majored in exercise science and did whatever as a master's degree. So as soon as we were done, I went to the academic counselor and changed my major to exercise science that afternoon, because I was in like sport coaching, sports management or something before that. But as soon as I saw it in action, and again, I was spoiled because himself and his staff at that time, I mean, they're the gold standard of this stuff. But when I saw them in action and saw, this is kind of like playing ball a little bit. It's intense, it's fast paced, it's training, it's being around the team, forging a team. It's living in a weight room. You don't have to go anywhere to train. You just train at work. And I was like, this is exactly what I wanted to do.
Well, up until that time, did you even know a position like that existed?
I did, just from a recruiting standpoint, going around visiting, like, the head strength coach will come talk to you, but yeah. I didn't, I would watch videos of like teams training and see, but like, I didn't know what it meant to be a strength coach. I didn't know there was a staff. There were 5 of them. There were Coach Jackson and the 4 assistants. I didn't know there was a staff. I didn't know, like when we go through a training session, it's going to be, 1 coach, 2 racks, and there's 4 of you, and he's responsible for you from start to finish. I mean, I just didn't know these things. And once I saw it, I was like, this is perfect. This is exactly what I want to do.
When you said coaching is a noble position, we all have stories and coaches that have kind of shaped our lives. So tell me about a time when you were younger that still sticks with you today.
I mean, there's so many. My high school head coach, Phil Hannon, I always tell people, he was probably the closest thing in, my time period of being in high school that you could get to Bear Bryant. He was just blood and guts. If we have anything going on or anything going wrong on the field, the answer is more physicality. He was just that kind of coach. But he was so inspiring and would hold you accountable on every single thing off the field, on the field, and you just felt like you were a better person having played for him, and you felt like, coaches talk all the time. I'll do anything for you. I love you just like you were my kids, whatever. But you truly felt that from him, and for a small high school, we had a lot of things happen. We had several students die while I was there, car wrecks and various other things, and watching him handle those situations and kind of rallying, the school to pick themselves up and move on. He was really the first one that I saw that made me think, this is what I want to do for a living, because the way he makes me feel, the way he makes my teammates feel, and the way he pushes us and makes us better men.
Can you remember any specific one-on-one time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think. That was so long ago. One story. He was our JV head coach, and he was the high school head coach. And this is not a good story about me, but just goes to show, like, it showed me the importance of, you never know who's watching, and everything you say and do matters. We were at the game on Friday night. It was on the road, and we had played our game, the night before, and me and the other ninth graders, my buddies or whatever, just kind of sitting by the fence around the field talking or whatever. And I called our head coach by his first name, like a joking way, said, Phil. And the following Monday at school, I guess somebody had heard me say that and said it to him. The following Monday at school, he confronted me in the hallway about it and was like, "What is my name?" And I said, "Coach Hannon." And he said, "Are you sure it's not Phil?" And I said, no, sir, it's Coach Hannon. He just read me the riot act about it. But that was one of those things. It's like, teaching you respect. Like, if it's an authority figure, you don't address them by the incorrect name. You address them by their title because they earned it. And it's like the old saying, like, they call you coach for a reason. Because they respect you, they look up to you. And it's like, I look up and respect Coach Hannon. Why on earth would I ever think it was okay to call him just by his first name? And that was one that stuck with me. And I'm still that same way now with my kids. Like, you're gonna call me Coach Brinson. You're not gonna call me just by my last name. You're definitely not gonna call me by my first name.
So I'm gonna assume that kind of wrecked the rest of your day.
Oh yeah.
It's interesting.
It was a bad day of practice.
Yeah, where things like that, and you can branch it off into more broad things. Things that will feel like this is the worst day of your life at the time. When time passes, you discover that was actually one of the best. And vice versa.
Right.
You can have a lot of days that you're like, man, this is the best day of my life. And then 10 years later, you're like, man, that was a bad choice.
Yeah.
So you always got to be careful how you frame things. I guess we learn this as we kind of get older. With getting back to the powerlifting, how did you figure out what your first meet was going to be, where you're going to compete? I mean, there's all those little variables that play into it.
So Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where Southern Miss is. So I would have been a intern at this time, I think. Yeah, I was an intern at this time. Hattiesburg is just lucky in that the state chair for the USPA and the USAPL are both live in Hattiesburg, and they both operate out of the same gym. So there's always USAPL and USPA meets rolling through there every couple of months. And when I got done and went into my internship there, I just looked at the calendar and saw in December there's going to be a USAPL meet, and then in January there's going to be a USPA meet. And I was ignorant enough that I didn't really know the differences, especially the subtle ones, between the two federations. So I had 6 months or so to train. And I knew I was doing back-to-back meets, which in my head was a smart decision because it's like, this is going to be my first meet, this one in December. I may do terrible. I'm going to have an opportunity to redeem myself in January. Well, I actually went the opposite. I did really well in the first one, and then I overthought and everything for the January meet. So I didn't realize that USAPL is going to be the same bar for all 3 lifts. You know, you've got to keep your feet flat on the bench press, head back on the bench press. USPA's, and it's going to be a 2-hour weigh-in. USPA is going to be a 24-hour weigh-in. All of a sudden, I'm in here with tested guys or non-tested guys. There's a different bar for each lift. I didn't know there was a difference in a deadlift bar or squat bar, you know, and there's a 24-hour weigh-in. So I did my first meet, USAPL, did pretty well. I think I went 8 for 9, totaled 1808, 1807 or something. And I didn't really know training wise what to do in that month in between that meet and my January meet, because you know, you're kind of in,
I don't think anybody does.
yeah, I mean, you're in limbo.
Yeah.
So I did the best I could. Well, then, you know, the weight classes are different because USAPL is using IPF weight classes and then USPA is not. So I was right around 300 pounds at the time. And for some reason, going into this USPA meet, I got really paranoid about being too big. I thought I'm going to get out of the 308s and weigh in as a super heavy. No idea why I thought that, but I did. And so I did like a 24-hour cut before weigh-in and lost way too much weight. Didn't recomp it very well. Go in, and again, attempts wise, I didn't really know what to do because you haven't gotten stronger in a month, especially a month after a meet, right? So I actually ended up totaling worse than I did the previous meet. I did better on the bench press, I think, but on squat and deadlift, I did worse. But it was a learning experience for me. It was the first time seeing what I would call serious powerlifters, you know, because the local USAPL meet, there's not going to be anybody remotely my size there. You know, odds are it's not going to happen. But at this USPA meet, I mean, Andy Huang was there. I saw him pass out at the top with an 800-pound deadlift. You know, I mean, there were some strong, big guys there. You know, so it was an eye-opening experience.
So how were you training for this? Were you training in the collegiate weight room, or okay? So interesting, right? Because you have 2 different cultures. Right. So you have that football training culture, then you have this powerlifting culture, which they're not identical in any way at all whatsoever. So what was, after those 2 meets, what was your perception of because those are actually 2 radically different meets too. So interesting perception that you would form, because after the first one, you're like, okay, this is powerlifting. And the second one, you're like, oh, wait, this is, and then
right.
Which one is actually, because they're radically different in their ways. Yeah.
Well, the first part of that, the football culture and the football training culture and the powerlifting culture could not be any further apart. And that was something that I battled basically my entire collegiate coaching experience, because I never worked on a staff where there was anyone else who competed in powerlifting. Now, there were other assistants who would train with me, and some of my really best friends in the industry compete in weightlifting. So I had guys doing that, but for the most part, I was completely by myself doing all of this. So that, you know, that is a very real thing. And then, you know, as far as, you know, like which one is, which one isn't.
Well, let's dial that back a little bit to give people a little bit better view of what that is. I think I know what it is, so I'll kind of put it out there. When you say by yourself, it's essentially just you in the weight room when nobody else is in there. Maybe some of the other people will spot you, but then they're going to go back to whatever their computer or whatever they have to. So you're in a dead weight room.
Yeah. You know, some of the staffs I worked on, we were really good about training together as a staff. Now, we may not all do the same thing, but like all 4 of us, we're all going to train at the same time. Some staffs, it was just train when you can, and everyone's schedule is a little bit different. So you would be training by yourself. Hey, come spot me, then go back. Or, you know, there were times where I needed a spot real quick and somebody was coaching the group, like, come over here, you're, you know, the men's golf team's okay for
Yeah.
the next couple of minutes. But really, it was literally, I would say 90% of my training has been by myself now.
Yeah, but see, that's a huge pivot from what you were doing when you were playing.
Oh, huge.
I mean, when you're playing, you're forced into a group, right? You 5, 6, or whatever it is.
And the intensity's there.
And the intensity has to be there, or the coaches get on their ass. And then all of a sudden you're like transported to this other world.
Yeah.
Where you're now expected to lift more weight.
Yeah. And I think if I didn't love training the way I did and had the background in it, like going back to middle school, that would have been a real problem. But it was almost a blessing in a way, because it's like, okay, now it's on me now. I wanted to do this. I wanted to prove how strong I am, how strong I can become. It doesn't matter if I'm by myself or not. I'm going to get this done. I've got to create that internal, not create it because it's always there, but I've got to create this intensity, even though I may be the only one in here.
Yeah. So how did you, because strength coaches are notoriously geeks about the X's and O's. And so you're laying out your training for that first meet, and there's far less variables for powerlifting training than there is any sport training, by far. That gets ignored, a lot of times, because now you don't have to worry about your laterals. So there's a lot of things you don't have to worry about, right? Which can be disregarded, which makes it kind of easier, right? But you can start to overthink it. And so when you're laying that all out, what type of plan were you laying out? Granted, training's training, like periodization across all forms, but people can better understand if you're saying it was a linear, or if it was blocked, or if it was conjugate, or what, because now you got freedom for pretty much your first time, outside of off seasons, to do whatever you want. So in your back of your head, you're like, finally, man. What was it?
Yeah, I think it was that, but it was also, what do I do? I don't have somebody telling me what to do now. And now it's like pressure because it's all on you. I, at least for the off season, at least if you could call it that, going into that meet, I ran Juggernaut. Somebody had given me the Juggernaut method book, and I ran that. The problem was that's not all I did. I also did the cone Philippi deadlift routine, and I also was doing somebody had given me this Russian bench cycle. I don't know if it was pulled from Shaco. I don't know where it was. I was actually running 3 programs all at the same time. I was doing Juggernaut for military press, squat, bench, and then I was doing the cone Philippi deadlift routine on its own separate day. But then I was also doing another bench day. There was, just crazy volume.
So you got a long linear program. You have essentially a block program. Then what was this Russian thing? Was that more?
It was linear. I mean, it was just climbing volume. You know. And
so your squat was kind of waving, and everything else was just periodizing.
Right. And I mean, the cone Philippi deadlift routine is brutal. And I'm pretty sure I read or somebody told me at some point it was originally intended to be done by itself. Like that's all you were supposed to do. And I was doing like 6 training days on top of that. But luckily, one of the other assistants, one of the guys I was talking about, who was a competitive weightlifter, saw what I was doing, knew I had a meet coming up, kind of gave me some guidance, and we got on a linear meet prep, just a typical 12-week, 10-week, whatever it was, prep leading into that meet, and kind of reined everything back in. Now, the problem was, as soon as the second meet was over and it was time to, get into the off season, it's like everyone who ever competes, I've got to get stronger on all 3 lifts. I want to add this to my total. This, and this needs to be brought up. I had issues here, and here. You just start doing everything. So I jumped right back into what I was doing before. I was cherry picking here and there, running everything possible.
How did you figure out what the issues were?
I Well, luckily, my second meet, I missed my third attempts. And so I just, missed my deadlift for whatever reason. It's got to be hamstrings, low back, glutes,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. I missed on my squat. My quads aren't strong enough. I'm not big enough. I was in the 308s, but I was the smallest 308. I didn't look the part. We've got to get, just guessing,
Yeah. Okay.
really. But, for
You didn't think to look at the first meet when it
you would
actually
you would think so, but I have always had the bad habit of, it's not a bad habit, but you look at your most recent work
yeah.
too harshly. If you have a bad meet, you base everything you're doing on that versus just writing it off. Because you're gonna have bad meets, you're gonna have bad preps, you're gonna get sick, whatever's gonna go on. And it doesn't mean everything you were doing leading up to that was wrong or flawed or bad or whatever. It's just you had a bad day, and a lot of people, myself included, will have a bad meet, and then all of a sudden all of your training needs to be overhauled. It
So that's essentially what you were doing.
yeah, it was, and if I read or studied something that looked like it would help me, I would throw it in there as a supplement, or I would scrap the program altogether, because this is what I talked about earlier with the coaching and training are very intertwined. This is also when I'm learning how to coach, so I'm a GA at this point, and, I'm getting more responsibilities. I'm in charge of the offensive and the defensive line with the football team. I'm leading the jumpers and sprinters of the track team. I'm helping with baseball, helping with softball, and I'm trying to increase my knowledge base with coaching. So you're just constantly reading and, all this information is coming in, and it's going to influence what I'm doing with my own training at some point.
It most definitely will. It's to a lesser degree, I kind of went through the same process where, you're the meathead linear power lifter.
Right.
For me, it was for a long time. Then I get into college and I start learning, all this other stuff. And then force, right? Then you're dealing with sprinters, throwers. So now you're dealing with explosive force, and your head's like, wait a minute. That can make this giant difference.
Right.
So then you find yourself like, we're doing plyos and stupid shit that, right?
Yeah.
Like, because everything that you're reading and even what you're seeing with the athletes, like this is increasing power output.
Yeah.
Right. But they're not you. Right.
Yeah.
And,
there was a training block that I decided clean pulls would help my deadlift.
I can see that.
I was like, we do them with the kids after our power cleans as an overload. And I thought, why not do them before I deadlift? Rate of force development, wake CNS up, violence and intent, all these things I need to deadlift. Why not do some clean pulls? We went through a huge triphasic phase where we were doing the Cal Dietz 4-day triphasic split with powerlifting in mind. We were doing the band assisted jumps, the death drops, the crazy overloaded eccentrics, and the hurdle hops paired with squat. We were doing all of it, and one of the guy that I've worked for the longest, Zach Woodfin, I worked for him at Southern Miss, Kansas, and Missouri. He was really big on the staff is going to condition during the summer 1 day a week like the kids do. And so, in South Mississippi, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we're out there running 110s as a staff, and I've got to go in and bench right afterward, or I squatted the day before, So it gets influenced absolutely by what you're doing with the athletes.
So from that, staying on the powerlifting perspective, how is because you start to figure shit out, right? Then once you figure stuff out, if you're smart, then you're not going to change a whole lot about the template of what you figured out. Now all the variables in the template are going to be able to change. What does that look like for you
now?
Yeah.
So, like you said, the general template hasn't changed much for, I don't know, 5-6 years now. I'm going to go 4 days a week. Sometimes I'm going to go 5 days a week. I'm always going to have a heavy bench day, a speed or volume bench day. I'm going to have a primary squat day. I'm going to have a deadlift day. In the off season, I'm going to do some type of deadlift variation after I squat, and on deadlift day, I'm going to have some type of squat variation before I pull. As we get into meet prep, those things are going to slowly start to come out just because the focus is on the big three. In the off season, we're going to go as long as we can without deloading. When I get into meet prep, I'm pretty strict about every fourth week I'm going to unload, or if we need it before that, whatever. But I go back and forth between just a standard linear climb and undulating. I undulate with my kids that I work with. I'm a big fan of it. I'm not as great about doing it with myself because I'm not as patient as, like, it's like the difference between the coach and the athlete in you. I know as the coach, the undulation on the down weeks are setting me up for the next week, but the athlete in me just wants to go all the time. So the undulation doesn't always happen, or it doesn't get programmed probably as much as it should. But everything is done in 3-week blocks. I am a big believer in that. We're gonna rotate accessory movements. We're going to rotate specialty bars. We're going to change something on pretty much everything every 3 weeks. Some things are never going to change. I'm always going to back squat. I'm always going to sumo deadlift because that's my competition stance. But everything else is, we're going to manipulate or change some variable every 3 weeks.
Well,
I actually had a question over here. Since we're talking about all the, you said it earlier, cherry picking.
Mm-hmm.
If you're preparing for a meet, would cherry picking make or break a meet? Kind of like sometimes when I train, I'm like, oh, I want to do this today. It kind of targets the same thing, but it's not what's on the program. Could that potentially make or break a meet if you sway for a little bit, just doing something that feels better or you prefer?
I think if you change for the sake of, like, you've got something going on, like you manipulate range of motion or use a different bar because you've got an ache or a pain or something, that can be beneficial. But if you just completely, go off program and all of a sudden, we're supposed to be handling 80% for like a triple today, and we decide, today's the day we're gonna take our heaviest lift, whatever the 3 are, that can be disastrous. But I mean, sometimes I'll change accessory movements in the middle of a session just based on how something's feeling. If it's something, it can be as simple as we switched to back extensions over glute ham raises just because, my left hamstrings bother me. That kind of stuff I don't think is gonna derail it. But like if you were to say we're 8 weeks out and I saw, pushing a prowler for active recovery could be beneficial, and we add prowler pushes in and we've never done them, yeah, we're gonna have trouble.
Yeah, I would say that if it's the main movement and you're having issues and warming up through the main movement, and then the first thing to look at would be, if it's really fucked up, restricting range of motion. What can you do in replay? That's still a mechanically similar movement. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't work, then I like to see people try to stay with the mechanically similar movement and as close to the prescribed percentage as they had, even if it means it might be like a 2-board press instead of to the chest, right? Because at least the percentage is still waving. You're just reducing a little bit of the range of motion, or keeping the top as close to what the top could be, which would be stripping some bar weight on, putting chain on, something like that to be able to do it. Then as we work down through the training day, the less it really begins to matter, as long as it's not increasing the workload too much for the total session. Like you want to put in with the prowlers, you want to put in the prowler, like if you're not already doing conditioning work, big problem. Right. But if you're already doing like heavy sleds, you're going to put the prowler in, and it's the same intensity, same work, same steps or whatever it's going to be. Cool. Hamstring movement, You know, if it's a glute ham raise and you don't feel like doing it, but the volume is 40 reps, fuck it, it's line leg curl. It's not going to make or break it. You don't want to do it for all the, you pick the movements for a reason, right? So you don't want to get away too long where this becomes basically what I feel is the most important skill of training, and that's the ability to auto-regulate all these decisions with the least consequence possible. If you're really good at it, there is no consequence, just benefit. Right. And that's where it's so fucking hard, and you work with younger kids. It's sticking to the plan is the most important thing when you're young. Not sticking to the plan is the most important thing when you're experienced.
And that's something that took me a really long time to learn as a power lifter.
I want to take a moment to give a shout out to my friends over at Mastonomics. I use their podcast a lot when vetting guests for the Table Talk podcast. I also listen to it a lot just because it cracks me up. Their YouTube channel is great. The podcast is on there, but they also have home gym reviews. Their apparel line is amazing. The standout products for me are these drink spotters. Rarely is it used for holding drinks. We have one on the monolift that holds the collars in between sets, smelling salts, chalk, whatever. You'd be surprised at how much crap you can put into one of these things. Their stall mat coasters they brought out last time they were on the podcast. These things are great. Check out their website, mastonomics.com, as well as their podcast and YouTube channel.
It took me a really long time to learn that, because if it was on paper, I'm supposed to do this today, it was going to get done no matter what. And it was going to get done at the detriment of the following week or even the meet itself, you know. And it took me a long time to learn that. And then also, you know, how to auto-regulate in an intelligent way. You know, it's modified. It's like you said, it's modifying to where the movement is similar. The body still recognizes what you're doing and is able to recognize the intensity that's required and that you need that day, the stimulus you need that day, but it's not beating you up, or you're staying out of, you know, a painful range of motion, whatever it is, you know. And that's something that took a long time to learn. And honestly, I mean, I don't think you learn that in any other way than experience.
No, and with your strength levels, everybody goes through this, but it gets more exposed the stronger you get. And that is, as you get stronger, your squats get in the 7s and the 8s, deadlifts get in the 7s and the 8s. Your workload just to get to the work set is way higher than your workload was when it was 500. But we don't think about that, right? So there's two factors to that. There's one, which a lot of people will just start decreasing everything else, right? To be able to have the recovery for the next session because of the added workload. And then on the other hand, you have to build your work capacity to be able to handle that workload as well as the accessories that are required. And some people get away with never having this being exposed. It's rare. It's rare. But it's a hard thing to try to manipulate and to figure out, because if your work capacity drops even that little bit, then you kind of are stuck with just doing the main lift and nothing else. But that's a bad hole to get stuck in long period, because then all the other weaknesses are going to begin to build, and then something's going to break. I mean, something's going to break anyhow, but something's going to break because of that specifically. So how did you, because that's a hard lesson to learn, right? Because you may not have the physical capacity to do a whole lot more after that main lift. And we all know the easy answer. You got to recover for the next session. And that's usually where most people just stop. And they don't think of, what do I need to be able to put in here, usually off-season wise, to be able to build that work capacity. So how did you go about learning that lesson and managing that?
Well, the most recent example I can think of is, you know, all the stops that I made in college, I would have 2+ hours to train. Now, I wouldn't use all of that, but if it needed to take that long, it could take that long. When I come into the high school setting, I've got 45, 50, maybe an hour to train. So now all of a sudden I've got to go from all the work that I was doing, taking an hour and a half, hour 45, it's got to take me 45 minutes now. So my work capacity has got to skyrocket because I've still, at minimum, probably need to do 75% of the amount of work I was doing previously.
Yes.
In order to keep trending up and getting stronger. How am I going to do this? And it was, it was rough at first, because like during the summertime, you would think, okay, it's easier because we're not in school. We just have training groups. We're basically coaching somebody from 6 a.m. till about noon, and then you got the rest of the day open. Well, yes, on paper that sounds better, but when you're coaching from 6 to noon, you never sit down. It's Mississippi in the summer. Mm-hmm. It's hot. It's humid. You're just sweating.
Your
like
adrenaline's
crazy.
Up and down.
Right. I mean, you're not ready to train right after that. Once school starts, now all of a sudden you've got a group, a break, basically all through the day. You've got windows in there, but you don't have the period of time that you had in the summertime. So for me, it's, if I can't, for one, to back up, I had to change how I was programming myself because I had to really sit down and look at what is important and what is not important. If I only have 45 minutes to train, what can I absolutely not live without? And it's the main movement. It's, the main accessory. We can superset that with another main accessory if it fits, if it doesn't fit, whatever. And then maybe 2 or 3 things. They probably got to be in a circuit. Mm-hmm. It's got to be one thing after the other, right? So, and even then, on upper body days, I'm a big fan of extended warm-ups. I want to do 3 or 4 movements, sets of 15 to 25 reps to get extra volume, get warm, whatever. How do I fit that in? And the easy answer is you just got to go faster. Mm-hmm. That's the easy answer. You got to suck it up and get in shape for the conditions and the parameters that, I'm in now, which was hard. And then also it was hard, I think, mentally letting go of a lot of training volume and kind of, I don't want to say junk volume, but stuff maybe I didn't really need, but mentally letting go of it, because if you're used to, a typical deadlift day for me, just say during COVID, was I would either work up to a top pull or I would have multiple top sets on deadlift. Then I would do stiff leg deadlifts for 5 sets of 3, 5 sets of 5. Well, then I would do really heavy farmer walks. Well, then I would do, some type of single leg movement, a couple post chain movements, and then I may do some type of abs. I mean, it's a pretty long day. Okay. You go from that to now my deadlift day is I'm going to do a top set on the safety bar. And I say top set, it may not be heavy. It may be like 70% for a triple. Just, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a top set of deadlift. I'm going to do farmer walks, and then I'm going to do glute hams. And that's it. That's a big mental hurdle to jump over. How am I going to continue to get stronger when my work has got cut in half? Well,
I think it's how you frame it.
Yeah. And that's really what it was. It was like, okay, I'm in my 30s now. I've been doing this for a long time. I cannot continue to train like I was when I was 20 or when I was 22, 23, whatever. I've got to change how I am training to keep being able to do this, number one. Number two, I mean, we've got a 9-month-old daughter now. I've got to train. Everything changes after that. If I can't train while I'm at work, I'm not training because I'm going home to see my kid. And so it's realizing you've got to get out of the some is good, more is better mindset, which is hard because if you go back to me in middle school, that's been my identity in training for a long, long time. Some is good, more is better. I'm going to train at the school. I'm going to go home. I'm going to train on the weekends. I'm going to train twice a day. We're going to get this done. To now all of a sudden you've got 45 minutes to train, pick what's most important, and let's roll. I've been at my current job for 4 years now. This is obviously a lot easier to deal with and manage than it was starting out because I've had a couple good meets under my belt and I'm stronger and healthier than, I've ever been, just continue to get better. So, it is a big jump mentally, but then it's also, you've got to decide from if we're getting into X's and O's of training, you've got to decide really what you need to do to get stronger. What movements really really drive progress versus don't drive progress.
And I think that I like to take things to the extreme to try to provide the example to where you take those low end movements that you were doing, you know, pull down abs, crunches, or whatever it is. You kind of know they really don't have correspondence,
Right.
very little. You know, it's just kind of a mental thing. And to where if we went back to when you were playing ball, you know, if, you know, after practice, you know, you and your buddies decide, hey, let's just do 20 hundreds. You'd be like, fuck, I ain't doing that shit.
Yeah.
And you're not doing it first off because it sucks, right?
Right.
But you're really not doing it because this isn't going to help us at all, right? Because it's so extreme, right? But it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's just when you boil it back down into here's something that's really not helping you at all. It's just taking more time. You know, it may not be hurting, right? But it's a hard argument to say it's helping.
Yeah. Well, it's the difference in like I said earlier, the coach in me and the athlete in me. The coach in me knows I can get stronger training 45 minutes a day if I really push a hard pace, no distractions, get in there, get out. The athlete in me wants to do more and more and more, but I know if
depending what the more is, because when you're playing ball, you're not going to go run extra miles,
right?
You know,
Yeah,
you know,
and it's also too, and this is something that I don't know if it gets talked about enough in powerlifting or just strength sports in general, is the work you did to get to a certain point is not necessarily needed to continue moving forward.
Oh, it's the opposite. It's inverse.
Right. You know, like when I look back at some of the training sessions I had as a young powerlifter and a young coach, I mean, it would hospitalize me now. You know, I mean, I can remember at Kansas, we came in for open gym on Saturday. And this is like in March, and I was on a really big high volume phase, and I did a 4x25 belt squat warm up with leg curl, and then I went in and did 10 sets of 5 on back squat with 585 with no belt, and it took me 2 hours to do it. And I can remember waking up the next day, and I mean, I couldn't move, you know, and it was like, did that do something for me mentally? Yeah. I mean, that was a really, I mean, it's to this day the hardest training session I think I've ever had. I mean, to overcome that mentally, yeah, that took some fortitude. But what did that do for me physically? It set me back probably a month, you know, and like if I were to do that now, you know, I'm going to end up in the hospital with rhabdo or whatever else, you know, and so it's learning that, you know, there's a difference in the work you've got to do to kind of get to a certain level and establish strength and like establish training habits. Because I do think there's value in training like that early on, because it teaches you, you know, unless you're just screwing around and saying you're training hard but not training hard, but like there is value in doing that stuff because it does teach you how to strain, not necessarily strain, you know, in a singular instance, you know, like one rep of one set, but like effort. Yeah. You know, it teaches you effort. It teaches you hard work and grit and all of those things. But at some point you've got to shift to, you know, I've got to really refine my approach or I'm not going to be doing this very much longer.
Well, you have to. And it's an internal debate that I have with myself all the time. Is it necessary for a lifter to go through that? Right. Right. And there's the brain. This is how I kind of explain training. There's the brain, there's the soul, right? The soul's what kind of gets us into the whole thing. Like we love to train. We love to train. Then the brain starts taking over. And when the brain takes over too much, you know, you're fucked, right? Because after a while, you'll start to lose why you're doing it in the first place. So you lose the love because it's kind of all up in here. But when you're in that developmental phase, a lot of things are happening. For one thing, for example, is your technical acuity is nowhere near as good, right? So your force output is way less than when you're stronger and when your form's better. Right. And this really rang out to me when I was training at Westside, but also a personal trainer at the time. And I don't know what the hell we did. It was some stupid shit to where we're going to take 80% and we're going to go as explosive as we fucking can and see how many reps we could get. And it was like 5. I mean, then the bar speed, yes, you could do more, but the bar speed dropped so much that it's 5. Then I went in to train a soccer player, high school soccer player, client of mine. I'm like, I wonder, and she wasn't that, maybe a 125 squat. I wonder how many she could do, right? It was like fucking 22, right? And I'm like, part of me is like, man, you suck. Then the other part of me is she did every one of these explosive as she could. I mean, they looked fast.
Yeah.
But that efficiency, that motor recruitment wasn't developed to the same degree, right? So there is that. Then there's the load, you know, that plays into that. But during those phases, you're also anchoring. When I'll have the clinics, I like to have people out and I'll anchor intensity, which is straining, the percentage of a 1 rep max. Like, this is what it's supposed to feel like.
Right.
Because your younger kids, they have to learn that only one way. And a lot of times it's kind of, then you yell at their ass and then they stand up fast. Then they end up doing 30 pounds more.
Right.
It was always there. They just didn't, it felt heavy.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't mean you can't lift more. Just, you learn that.
Right.
So you have to anchor intensity, but you have to anchor effort. You know, and efforts where you can have somebody, leg press is the best one. Because somebody might do a set of 12, but I'll guarantee you get 3 other people around them. You start, you know, getting on their shit. All of a sudden they're doing 20.
Yeah. We found some extra reps.
Yeah. And then we're like, okay, you're training on an RPE or reps and 2 reps in reserve, but fuck, you just did 18 extra. Like, what was that? Those are important to anchor. Especially if, you know, if it's an online coach working with a client, you got to anchor that shit somehow. Right. Because how do you know, right? When you're in person with these people, you can figure, but personally, we got to figure it all out. Once you figure it all out, then you can sit there and say, okay, I got to do, you know, glute ham raises. It says 4 sets of 10, but maybe I loaded it a little bit, right? And I just bust ass. I put 4 sets of 10 of effort into 2 sets of 8. Yeah. Fair trade. Yeah. Probably better option, but you can't do it all the time. Right. Right. Because it's too much effort for that. I think there's only one way you figure this out. You have to learn it. Yeah. Right. You got to train. You have to train. You have to kind of go through it. And there are outliers, you know, the ones that are always going to do that. And then what they need are somebody to be able to bring them down. Right. Like the best athletes don't need pushed, they need pulled. Yeah. You know, like slow the fuck down, bring it down. Yeah. Right. That's the best place to get people to is now you're at that place. But when it's yourself, and then you have to pull it down, it's a weird transition. Yeah. Because like, man, I'm a puss. Like I just, you know, I need to build up my work capacity so I can do this. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, especially because like I was doing all this by myself. Yeah. You know, and like, it'd be one thing if I was like in a crew or, you know, had a training partner or two, you know, to help see these things. But, you know, when you're doing the majority of your work by yourself, it literally is everything you're doing is through trial and error.
Yeah. And when you talked earlier, because when you get towards your, I don't know how to frame it, top end strength, your top genetic strength, which I don't think exists, but your top end, where things get harder to program. The gains don't come as easy. When you get there and you're talking about your squat, like sometimes you undulate it, sometimes you don't, you know, sometimes it's a week. I think that's the correct path, right? Because you're going to know, like you'll know the day after that last, if you run it for 4 weeks and say you want to try to go 5, you're going to know after that 4th, maybe I shouldn't have done the 4th. Yeah. But a lot of times that you might be able to string it into 2-3 week waves, progressing the whole time. Right. And then it's going to have to come down. And I think you have to take advantage of those situations because they're not always there and strength is not linear. Yeah. You know, there's always, you know, this weird path.
Yeah. And also, you know, this took me a while to learn too, but not all 3 lifts are going to feel good in a training block. They're not all, and it's very rare all 3 of them you feel like you're making progress on. You know, your squat may be feeling really good, but your deadlift feels awful. You know, I mean, I'm in the middle of a meet prep right now, and until the pull I had last week, I felt like I'd forgotten how to deadlift. I hadn't changed anything, but it wasn't there. Meanwhile, my squat has been the best it's ever felt, and we'll see what the last 6 weeks have in store for me. But I mean, they're not always going to feel good at the same time. And that's tricky too with undulating, because if it's a down week or if it's an up week and you're not feeling good on that lift at the same time, then what do you do? Right? You've got to, do you change the variation the next block? Do you stay with undulation? Do you, add accommodating resistance? I mean, there's all these different things that are in play, and, I still don't have all the answers, not even close to all the answers, but I mean, I know a lot more now than I did 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's, if I had to answer that in the default, blanket way, which is never right, is the first thing I would try to do is to bring the arousal curve as high as I possibly can, more than required for training, just for one of the days, and realize that when you do that, you just fuck next week.
Yeah.
But what you're really testing is the strength actually still there, and you're just not recovering from what's there? Because if you can mentally you can add 10% just from that mental arousal.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you say that, because.
But you're going to pay.
Yeah, I mean, my deadlift last week was the best it's felt in. We started this prep 12 weeks out, and we're 6 weeks starting Monday. The first 5 weeks of prep, deadlift was awful, and that's what happened. I finally got into my head, got ramped up, treated it like a meet day, smoked 90%. I was like, oh, I didn't forget how to do this. It was just, I'm tired, I'm under-recovered, the mental arousal wasn't there, and, with me, and I mean, this is with everybody, but with me especially, deadlift is so psychological. Yeah. If I'm not switched on, it's not going to be a good pull.
Well, see, that's the tricky part, because your squat may be going really well,
right?
Because you don't have all that arousal.
I don't have any mental arousal.
So it's balancing. Right. I call them like zippy cards. It's balancing how frequently you have to play that, because ultimately the only time that it's never going to happen. But the only time it really should happen should be in a meet.
Yeah.
But it's never going to happen, because you got to gauge what the hell is going on, because. Yeah. In most cases like that, all your accessories and all your other lifts are right on point for the deadlift to be where it's supposed to be. Every indicator is telling you that's where it is, but you get in your head, right? And then your head's like, no, it's not. And then you start playing these scenarios like, is it ever going to come around? And then there's all this other negative self-talk shit, which needs to be reframed, and then the best way to reframe it is that. It's like, oh, it's there.
Yeah.
Cool. You can bring it back down, write it out,
yeah.
deload it, and then all of a sudden it's there again. But it takes time to figure it out.
It does. And it's also like little things, like realizing that we've been pushing the safety bar before I pull really hard this prep. And, not this past week, but the week before, when my deadlift felt the worst, I'd PR'd my safety bar right before. And it was like, well, obviously, if I'm looking at this objectively, that's why the deadlift went bad. But, I do the mistake that everyone makes, and it's I don't know why I ever do this, but you go back and you look at your old training logs, and I see, oh, well, we were doing singles. We've been doing 3s, 2s, and 1s on safety bar before pulls. 4 years ago, I was doing 5 triples, 5x5. Why can't I do this now? Well, that's the athlete in me talking, not the coach in me talking.
Yeah. Well, I used to keep very detailed training logs. And then when I moved to Columbus to train at Westside, and I brought it out one day, to be able to write down what we did afterwards. Louis lost his shit, grabbed it, threw it in the trash. And I never really understood why. I mean, for a while, I'd kind of like go home and write down But I would leave there, then go train clients. And so by the time I had the time to actually put it down, I kind of forgot most of what we did. And to give credit to him, he kind of knew what all of our numbers were on everything. But what he was actually doing with all that is by removing that completely, I was no longer able to do that. And I'm going from linear to a conjugate. So I'm doing movements I've never done before in my life. So I don't even know what's good.
Yeah.
Like, is this even fucking good? Like, my only basic comparison is off other people that are in the gym and off what I did. And then by the time it rotated back in again, I don't even remember what the fuck I did the last time.
Yeah.
You know, so it removed that, which I'm not saying this is a good thing, but I'm saying it's a thing that, you know, for all of us there, and looking back, enhanced that ability to auto-regulate every single variable of the training, because all we had to go on is what we feel like when we're going in, what we feel like warming up, what the last rep felt like, you know, what we think we have left in the tank before this is over. And then it's just pivot, and so forth. And every now and then again, we'd have a couple lifters that are always strong as fuck. They do like just the main thing and then bolt.
Yeah.
Right. And some of them got away with it and were just strong as shit. You know, some of the other ones ended up getting hurt, you know, in the long run. But that was kind of frustrating too, because like, this motherfucker. Yeah. But it's all, I think if you tried to do that to somebody now without a group, because the group's managing that too. Like, look, back this shit off, you know, or the opposite, you know, go harder, you know, then to figure that out on your own, I think you're going to make more mistakes than not if you don't have something to look back on.
Yeah. And like what you just described to me is true auto-regulation. It's in a group setting, everyone's coaching each other, or you have a coach overseeing everything who's very knowledgeable and knows he probably knew your body better than you knew.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so you have someone like that watching and observing, making decisions, and you're basing everything, like you said, on the warm-up before the warm-up, the warm-up with the bar, and your ascending sets. That's real auto-regulation versus, you know, what I've done in the past, and a lot of people have done in the past, and it's, we have, you know, to 100th of a percentage on paper written down.
Yeah.
All, you know, as the plan, and if we feel off at all, we may back off. You know, I mean, that is auto-regulation in a sense, but what you're describing, that really is auto-regulation.
Yeah. There was, we had strength coaches we visit all the time, and one of them were in on one of the bench days, and I remember this distinctly because it just cracked me up. George Halbert was working up on whatever we were doing, say 2 board press, and he had a grinder rep, and then a lot of times that would be it. He decided to go up one more, did another one, and it was more of a grinder rep. It was completed, it was done, and then went on to, you know, 3 or 4 sets of real heavy, you know, rolling tricep extensions. And then everybody else, the grinder sets were, with the max effort work, we never used 5s or 2s. It was dimes. So if I did a lift and it's like, I can't go 20 more pounds, I know that, everybody else knows that, I'm done, right? That doesn't mean that it was truly 100% that grinder rep like George would have had, right?
Right.
So we're all moving on to like push downs and other kind of shit. When the coaches asked George, like, well, why are you not doing, you know, the push downs like everything else? And he said, what exactly do you think those are going to do that I didn't already achieve? Right. So it's, that's that regulation thing at that more minor level, you know, of that whole thing. And I never, you know, looking back, you look at things differently. I never could really understand like why we'd make fun of each other for using like 2s and 5s and shit like that for them. But it makes sense, right? Because sometimes you're going to have that one that's truly full grind, but most of the time you really kind of got one more left, but because the minimum jump was 20 pounds,
it saved you
to be able to do a lot of that other stuff. And without that group dynamic, like you're talking about, you don't know all that, you know, and looking back, a lot of this I didn't even understand until far removed. Like, oh, wow, that makes sense, you know, with that. So it's, we can talk about it, people can understand it. And I'm sure when I was coming up and when you were coming up, people were talking about it and we heard it. We just ignored it, right? Because that phase that you're in, and maybe you got to get hurt. It's something's going to happen, which is going to allow that to kind of come into place. Where what I really think the whole thing is you have to learn how to get out of your head.
Yeah.
Right. Then when you get out of your head, and it's fucked up for the strength coaches and trainers, because everything you're learning is it's almost better for the person that doesn't know shit about any of this.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're just all here and they're just going off of how they feel, like, fuck it feels good, I can do it. No, I can't do that. We've all trained around people like that. Right. And you're like, man, they don't know shit about training, but they're strong as fuck. I'm like, they know more about this than this.
Yeah, they're not analyzing everything.
Yeah.
They're not
hyper-analyzing.
comparing it to the textbook.
Yeah. So with all this in mind, right? You're a Division I strength coach, and now while you're doing that, you're dealing with the majority of the athletes who are in the weight room as we would do our GPP as a powerlifter. It's just checking the box. They have to do it. They care, but they don't love it.
Right.
And then from there, you go into the tactical training, which that's where I have the question, because I understand the Division I athletes. I get that. Their thing is football or whatever sport they're training. We all understand that, except for stupid meatheads that think
there's a means to an end for them.
Exactly. Yeah. We all get that. And it's, except for the meatheads that say, well, they should be way stronger than what they are. Like, you know what? They're already. Look, a 700-pound squat's not going to help them more than the 625 they're already doing.
Right.
They just suck coming off the ball.
Yeah.
And now, so you go from that, and they got a good base too, right? Their work capacity is high. Even for the linemen, the work capacity is higher than most people think it is.
Yeah.
And that's another interesting thing too, because the work capacity with a powerlifter, like we talked about, when we speak about work capacity, the ability to do work, it just needs to be at the level of the sports you want to do. Look at CrossFitters.
Yeah.
I mean, their work capacity is through the roof. So you can have work capacity over and above what's required, and that's fine. It just takes more time, and it's not going to help you, right? And it puts you in that mental predicament that you were talking about. It drops below, then there's a problem. When you start working with the special forces, what is that work capacity? Because that's with any of the sports, you're training for a season, right? With these guys, they don't know when they're going to be deployed, so they need to kind of be ready at all time. So there is it's definitely not like powerlifting periodization. There's like a base that they have to stay at all time. So how was that pivot from what you were working with, which all had off seasons? Did you work with just one sport or multiple sports?
In college, at Southern Miss, I worked with multiple, and then Kansas, Liberty, Missouri was just with football.
Okay, so you have the experience with having multiple peaks, and then a real off season, Okay, the real off season, so forth, is beautiful, But when you have to coach, all these different variations, it's a little weird. Now with these guys, how do you manage that?
So I was with the 82nd Airborne for, I guess it would have been a little over 2 months. And I don't want to misspeak because there's people who know more about this than me, but strength and conditioning is still relatively new to the military. This is not something that's been around for a really long time. So everything that we do is pretty foreign to them. And like you said, they've got to be ready at a moment's notice. I mean, the 82nd Airborne's, famous for they can deploy anywhere on Earth in 24 hours, and deploy in mass, right? So there is a state of readiness from a training standpoint they've got to be at essentially all the time. And because strength and conditioning is still relatively new in that setting, there's a lot of debate and I think uncertainty on what we should do with them, because there's not just years and years of work to look at to base what we're doing, And so when I came in, I had a little bit of a preconceived notion, but it was confirmed for me really quick when we started working with the soldiers that they are incredibly elite at what they do. Jumping out of an airplane with 100 pounds of gear on into a battlefield, getting shot at, and immediately jumping into action. I mean, that's something I can't even wrap my head around, right? I mean, when you go to the drop zone at Bragg and watch them do it, I mean, it's incredible. And I mean, they're the best in the world for a reason. However, when it comes to training, when it comes to just say strength and conditioning, we'll call it that, the majority of the soldiers are novices because they don't have any background in this stuff other than boot camp and the training that they've done since being in the Army. There's still lots and lots of soldiers who weren't athletes growing up. They're not all coming from West Point where they were on the football team or whatever sports team. They don't have exposure to these things. And because they don't have exposure to these things, the training needs to be very general. Now, the training needs to be very general because they've got to get better at a lot of things. We've got to get more mobile. We've got to get stronger. We've got to increase durability. We may need some muscle mass. We may need to lose some weight. General work capacity still needs to come up. There's a lot of boxes that we've got to check from a training standpoint with these soldiers. So with all of that in mind, I'm sitting there, we're in a staff meeting, we're talking about all of these things, and I list out all the things I'm seeing that we need to get better at. And to me, that screams a conjugate approach because we need to train. Everything. We need to train multiple variables all the time. We can't go through a 6-week hypertrophy block and then a 6-week basic strength block and then a strength to power. I mean, we don't have time for that. Also, they're going to deploy on training missions all the time. I was at Bragg for a week before basically the entire group went down to Louisiana for a mass training exercise, and they were gone for 2 weeks. I mean, they didn't do any PT while they were gone. So if we had written out a linear plan, it's the middle of a hypertrophy block, what are we doing? And so there was a little bit of a disconnect with myself and some of the other coaches because a lot of the coaches that were there, this was their first job, or they were straight out of school, or they had worked in the private sector before. So they were going in thinking, we need to do this exactly like the textbook says. We need to go through an anatomical adaptation phase, then a hypertrophy phase, and just build them up slowly. And I'm coming from, the collegiate background, and just I'm not even thinking about the textbook. I'm thinking practical. Basically, we're not good at anything in a training environment. We need to get better at everything, and we need to get better now. So we need as many exposures to the 4 or 5 things that we, from a general athletic standpoint, we say are important, and we need to do those immediately. And so, from a training standpoint, it didn't look that different from training athletes. We would the way the battalion that I was attached to, the company that I was attached to was actually cooks and mechanics. And so their PT hours were a lot different than everybody else because they had, they're not infantry, they're not ordnance, where they're basically just going to the range and training or going to the woods and training all day. They have jobs. Yeah. So their PT hours were different. So they would train separate from the rest of the battalion and the rest of the companies that would train, early in the morning. And when it was just me and them, I would train them like athletes. I mean, we would do a dynamic warm-up, we would jump, we would skip, we would run, we would change direction. I mean, we would just do things that I knew they weren't used to doing and just needed to do more of. And then we would go either, into the weight room, or we would go to the box that had the loadout in it, and we would train like athletes. I mean, we would squat, we would press, we would hinge, we would carry, we would do, lots of post chain because they're hunched over something all day, to help with their posture. We would do some type of GPP work, because they need, it's weird because their job in a sense is GPP, a lot of it, but it's specific GPP. I don't want to say SPP, but it's specific GPP to what they do. Yeah. Right. Yeah. They still need broader, wider capacity brought up, that's gonna make them more durable in the long run. It's tricky, but they do need more capacity. And this was also when the Army and the armed forces were kind of tightening up some of the physical standards. The fitness tests had just changed, and it was a lot more athletic. There were med ball throws, there was sprinting, there was jumping, there was carrying. It wasn't just pull-ups, run a mile, and do some push-ups. It was a lot more extensive and athletic when I was there. So there was a lot of their training was based around that, because there was a lot of anxiety with the soldiers with that test, because it did require you to be an athlete. It required you to strain. There was a max rep or max weight trap bar deadlift, and for someone who's never lifted weights, that's intimidating.
Yeah.
The hanging knee tuck was still in. They took it out right after I left because so many people complained about it, but I don't know if you've seen it. It's, you take a grip on the pull-up bar and it's knees to elbows as many times as you can get while hanging from a pull-up bar. That's intimidating. The sprint drag carry is an intimidating test if you don't have an athletic background. So,
well, from a coaching standpoint, those things are kind of nice to have, because you have metrics to train
exactly for. And it gives you something specific to work on.
Yeah.
And before, I would have just assumed when all you had to get ready for was push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, and running, that's all they did in PT. And wanting to increase the readiness of our soldiers required better training, but the only way that was going to happen is if the test required better metrics.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to change PT that they've been doing. Some companies, some master sergeants have been doing the same PT for 20 years. They're not changing that unless the test itself changed.
Yeah.
So, when I'd come in, the test had either just been approved or was fixing to get approved. And so everyone was a little bit in a state of panic over this, because they didn't know how anyone was going to score. Everyone was doing practice tests as companies, and it was making it competitive, But I mean, it was an eye-opening experience for me, because it showed me that just because someone is really elite at their job does not mean they're going to be elite with what we do with them.
Yeah.
And I was blessed in that I worked at some big football programs where there weren't that many guys we brought in who were just complete novices in the weight room. You're not going into the SEC as a freshman. It's very rare coming in incredibly physically underdeveloped, right?
Yeah.
So yes, they're freshmen. Yes, we got a lot of work to do, but they're still pretty far along.
They have a higher baseline.
They have a higher baseline, even though this isn't the main thing for them, or even close to the main thing. When I got to Bragg, it was, I don't think it could have sequenced any better for me going into the high school, middle school setting, because it showed me, really what basic simple training needs to look like for complete novices.
Yeah.
Which is really what I was getting into when I got to my current job.
Dave Tate here from EliteFTS to talk to you about bands. We've been a supplier of bands for almost 2 decades now. So I've known my way around the band landscape. When I'm talking about bands, I'm talking about floss bands, long bands, short bands, bands you can use for resistance training, mobility training, body weight training, and flossing. One of our most popular bands, or actually our most popular bands, are the long bands. The long bands are typically used the most with squats, bench presses. Our floss bands are bands that you wrap around the joint to be able to help with mobility, circulation. And the short bands are designed for shorter range movements, bench press, deadlifts, and a lot of times people will use them with resistance machines to help accommodate the strength resistance curve. Head over to EliteFTS.com and look for bands in the toolbar or blowout menu. Okay, so where we left off was you moving into the high school sector. The question I have before that is, and I think I know the answer, but I could be wrong. You had five Division I jobs moving around?
Southern Miss, Kansas, Liberty, four.
Four,
Four.
right? Four, and that's normal. Right?
Yeah,
So, and well, it's I don't want to harp too much on that because I've had other coaches out just trying to explain to people, if you want to go this route, this is part of the route. Like you're, and a lot don't want to do that, and they'll leave because of that, right? So my assumption is that's probably why you left, because of that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a different life.
It is a different life, and I didn't have the intention of leaving it. You know, I wanted to try tactical because I had so many people who were doing it who loved it, and I thought, you know, let's even out the work-life balance a little bit. Let's try to stop the moving around as much, you know, and then also this could be really beneficial for my powerlifting career. You know, because if I'm not working as much, it's more time to train, you know. It's not as active, right?
So there's the meathead that I wanted to talk to.
Yeah. And the high school thing kind of just fell into my lap because it's 10 minutes from where I grew up, the school that I'm at, Jackson Academy. And they were looking for a strength coach. One of our rival schools has had a strength coach for 7 years now, and they were the first one in the area, maybe the first one in the entire state of Mississippi that had one. You know, Mississippi's.
No, I knew you were the first where you're at now, but I didn't know it's like the whole state.
Yeah, well, the guy at the other school was one of the first. Wow. And you know, we're really behind in strength and conditioning in the state of Mississippi. And so basically, you know, they were getting beat by the school in a lot of sports, football mainly, and it, you know, I think the powers that be came together and said, we need to get this. And one of the guys who was in the know happened to know my old boss, Zach Woodfin, and called him and said, you know, we're looking for a strength coach at Jackson Academy. Do you know anybody? And he said, actually, I know the perfect guy. He's from the area, and gave me a call, and the rest is history.
So what'd you walk into? Because there was nothing there. The cool thing here is you can build it.
That was the best thing about it, is it was a completely blank slate. Now, what they had done is the football team was trained by the linebacker coach who was leaving to go to another school. He had been the strength coach for the football team for maybe 10 years. He never wanted to be the strength coach. They just gave him the job, and he did the best that he could. And he did do a good job with the guys. But he would be the first one to tell you, I'm not a strength coach. I don't know this stuff. I'm a football coach.
So what kind of facility was he working out of?
So the room when I got there was a little strange because there was the main weight room floor, which had 10 racks.
No shit.
And
no coach.
Yeah. They had 10 racks. It was a long, narrow room. There was plenty of space. There was 5 racks on this side, 5 on the other. There was plenty of room in between racks. They had, I was really happy that they had 10 of everything. We had 10 Texas Power bars. We had 10 trap bars. We had 10 sets of plates. We didn't have any bumper plates. We had 10 sets of plates. We had a set of dumbbells and went from 5 to 100. You know, so we had 5 back extensions. So we had the framework to do something. Now, where the room gets strange is outside of that main room, there's a connected room that had a glass, basically entryway with double doors that had selectorized hammer strength machines. Had one of everything in it. And I'm coming in, one, I need a lot of equipment. I needed Olympic bars. I needed bumper plates. I needed prowlers. I needed stuff for speed training. I mean, there was stuff that I needed. And I'm not going to use any machines because one of every machine I can't do anything with that. And it was so congested in there that you couldn't move around. So I sold all the equipment to a company that turned around and gave me the stuff I wanted. But we saw this huge glass partition. And also the flooring was different in that room versus the main room. It was 2 different floors because the main room, the main training floor, was never supposed to be a weight room. It was supposed to be like a multi-purpose room. So the flooring was, you know, real thin didn't have any, absorption quality to it, and it was slippery. So we had the space to get something done, and we had the absolute bare essentials equipment-wise, but we just had to move things around. Now, I got bumpers, I got bars, we've gotten kettlebells, I've gotten med balls, we have brand new flooring in there, the glass partitions out. I mean, it looks like this was always supposed to be a weight room.
Okay.
So that's what I walked into from an equipment standpoint.
Right. Now, what about the athletes?
Now, from a training standpoint, from an athlete standpoint, I got there would have been May. So they had 1 week of school left before they let out, and then we were going to come back for the summer. So because of the way the weight room was set up and I was by myself, there was no way I was going to get the weight room laid out the way I wanted to even think about bringing them in the weight room yet. And with the logistics of it, I just said, we're going to wait on the weight room until we come back in June. We're going to do 3 movement sessions on the field. And I had objectives that I had laid out. I want us to learn how to warm up exactly the way I want it done, how I want it done. It's going to look correct. That's objective number 1. We're going to hammer the warm up for 3 days. Objective number 2 is I need to see them sprint, because I need to see where we are. Do we know how to sprint? Can we get in any positions at all? Do we have any concept of like shin angles or mechanics, anything? We're going to sprint, and then I wanted to see them, we were going to condition. I wanted to see them suffer together as a team to see how we responded. So first day we came out, and this is just the football team now. So I have everybody 7th through 12th grade, male and female, but this 1 week intro was just the football team.
Which I guess you could look at as a benchmark of the highest standard that you're going to see across the board.
Right.
Yeah.
In a school our size, the majority of your male athletes are going to play football. You're not going to have that many that only play basketball and only play baseball. You're going to have a good majority that only play football, but the majority of your male athletes are going to play football. So it was a pretty good snapshot of what I was working with. And I'll never forget, we come out for the first workout, and we had to do it on the practice field. We couldn't do it on the game field because they were having soccer tryouts. So I was, and we hadn't had any lines painted, nothing. So, I'm like, we're already starting off not great. So we're out there, and there's probably 40 kids, and I'm thinking, we've got 7th graders out here, we got 8th graders out here, because like some of these kids are tiny. And we get done with the session, and it went about how I thought it would. There was a lot we had to improve on. They didn't, whatever training that they had done prior to me getting there, they had not done on the field. There was, all of this stuff was new and foreign to them.
How was the coachability of all of them as a team?
We had a lot of work to do there.
All right.
We had a lot of work to do there. But I'll never forget, we get done with the session, and I'm talking with some of the coaches who were still around, and I was, kind of just asking the demographic of the group. They're like, no, that's the high school team. And I thought, wait a minute, I swore there were 8th and 9th graders out here. No, those are all high schoolers. I thought, we've got a lot of work to do, because we don't look the part at all right now, majority of us. The second day, our speed session, a lot of work to do. We didn't understand the difference between sprinting and conditioning yet. We didn't understand the intent that was needed for speed development yet. The first conditioning session that we had, I decided we're going to run shuttles because shuttles are undefeated. We don't have to run a lot of them to get my desired outcome. And, there's a lot of room for error in that. They don't touch the line, they touch with the wrong foot, they turn the wrong way, whatever. And I wanted that. I wanted us to fail. I wanted to see how we would respond, because I just don't know how these kids react to anything. And we had to do like 4 or 5 perfect 60-yard shuttles, and we ended up doubling and tripling that fairly easily because we just couldn't get it together. And at the time, the athletic director was out there watching, and purposely I was waiting till the last second to tell them which direction they needed to face when they turned, when they hit the lines, because I wanted it to be, left and then immediately blow the whistle, because I wanted, or give them the set command, whatever, because I wanted them to have to think, react, do, not give it to them a minute out and just sit there and talk amongst themselves. I wanted it, fast. And one of the early reps, all the kids are looking at me, which hand we touching, where which foot are we touching with, and I'm just staring at them. I'm not telling you until the very last second. And the athletic director spoke on their behalf and yelled at me, "Coach, which hand is it?" And I just ignored him. And then we get done with the session, and I tell everybody, this is why we are doing it this way, because when you're on the field, the call is going to come in late. You're not going to get it perfectly with 20 seconds left on the play clock to be able to, you're going to change the play's going to come in late, whatever. We've got to be able to think, we got to be able to react. And so that was the kind of stuff I was dealing with. There wasn't the urgency there. There wasn't any sense of how important this stuff was for athletic development yet. And it took us a long time to get to where we are now. There was things I was having to really hammer them on. We live in Mississippi. It's very hot. It's very humid. When you're on campus, I expect to see you with some kind of water, a water jug, water bottle, something at all times. We've got to be hydrated. We have to eat breakfast in the mornings. These are just things we didn't know, which is great because I was able to mold them exactly the way I wanted it and create and shape the program the way I wanted it to look. That I wasn't having to fight, old habits and everything like that. It was just, there were no habits. There were no standards. There were no expectations, anything at all.
So if you were to have seen them practice in football practice before you got there, would there have been structure?
From what I was told, no. So they got a new head coach. They hired the new head coach right after I got there. So it wasn't the same head coach.
All right. So what I was wondering is, was there just that disconnect because it was strength and conditioning, but if they were on, the football field with the coach, everything's there, like they know what to do, but they're just choosing not to, where it sounds like they just didn't know what to do.
I think there was, with football specifically, I think there was some of that going on. There wasn't a lot of discipline, and one of the things they were looking for was with this role, with this department, was discipline. And that was one of the things that, I sold myself hard on, that I brought to the table, was discipline. And so there was some of that going on. There was also just, lack of organization, lack of accountability. When there's not systems and structures in place, young athletes are going to take advantage of that.
So when you came in, you have 7 through 12, is that right? Mm-hmm. So when you came in, you've been there 4 years. So now you almost have the first years out, or so they'll be out next year.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't want to say it's complete, but your start is now going to be, the guys coming in are going to now be mentored by the people that you work that started with you.
Exactly.
Right. When the seniors are out, then it's 100% that's the case. But hopefully the seniors have already lost all those bad habits. But things can begin to change really, really quick once that full, rotation happens.
Yeah.
Where have you already seen that start to happen?
No, I've seen that. One, from just a physical development standpoint, each group of seniors that we've had have been physically so much better than the one prior to them, because they've just had another year of training.
Yeah.
The buy-in and the expectation of what I expect from the athlete's standpoint, I don't feel like it's something I've got to harp on as hard anymore. That's not to say I don't do that, but it's more expected. Like, I can see the kids when somebody shows up late, like they know what's coming, versus when I first got there, it was like, oh, Johnny's late, things like that. And it's sort of nuanced because each group of 7th graders that we get is so different than the group before them, not only just athletically, but also socially. Some groups have been really buttoned up and really disciplined, act right in the classroom, behave really well. You know what to expect out of them every single day. We've had some groups have been the complete opposite of that, and then just athletically, you can tell which groups have been playing sports versus the groups that haven't been playing sports. And, there's no rhyme or reason to that. It's just, like our current group of 7th graders that we have right now is probably our best from an athletic standpoint. And majority of these kids have been playing Pee Wee football for 2-3 years at this point. They've been playing travel baseball, which is a good and a bad thing. They've just been a lot more active than some of our other 7th grade groups have been. So they're able to pick up on a lot of the concepts and the things that we're doing faster. Some of that I think is our process has gotten better. Our teaching process has gotten better. We've refined what we're doing, we've cut some of the fluff out, and we know what we need to hammer and what we need to teach and how we need to teach it a little bit better than we did, last year and 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. But each group is so different coming in that, you hope that by the time they're ready to move to the next grade, they are not really different anymore, if that makes sense. They are the way you want 8th graders to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because each grade, and I tell the kids this, each grade, the objective is to get them ready for the next grade from a training standpoint. And then big picture, it's when they're in the JV, it's to get them ready for their 9th grade year. When they're in their 9th grade year, it's to get them ready for varsity, which is coming, a year from that date. We tell them all the time when it's, football season and they're in the 9th grade, this time next year, you guys are playing on Friday nights. And that means training goes up to here, practice goes up to here, whatever else, everything we do has got to be getting you ready for that. When they're in the 8th grade, it's this time next year, you guys are in the 9th grade. We're having this talk that a year from now, you guys are going to be in the varsity, right? So it's a lot more, how do I want to say this? It's a lot more, or it resembles much more like an assembly line now compared to what it did. It's just that each group coming in is slightly different. So our approach has got to be slightly different.
Because it's all athletes, and when you say prepare them for whatever that next year is, does each sport have its own specific benchmarks, or is it just the athlete as a whole, which I would assume, right,
as a whole
would have a benchmark to be able to move forward each year?
Yeah.
Because in the high school sector is interesting. You're in it. Is you'll see some that have just ridiculous degrees of specificity that I don't know is necessary.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's physical development. Right. And you got to raise it just kind of like you had with Airborne, but younger. You got to raise all capacities.
Right.
From one year to the next year to the next year to the next year. How do you then deal with, I want to say multi-sport athletes, but that becomes multiple facet because there's multi-sport in your school, but then there's another layer, which is multi-sport of any of the club shit that they're doing as well, which is for some demographics is ridiculous to put it bluntly. Yeah. But you have to deal with that because foot contacts are still foot contacts and that still plays into whatever you're going to do, especially if it's the stuff outside of the weight room. And first off, do you even know?
Yeah. So starting with the club thing and the travel thing before we get into the multi-sport thing, that was one thing I was really ignorant about coming in because, I hadn't thought a second about high school or middle school athletics since I graduated high school. So I had no idea travel baseball AAU had exploded to the level that it did, nor did I know that travel football is now a thing. Travel football is a thing in Mississippi. So when they're in middle school, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, they will be on a travel football team, tackle football team. So they'll play a game for the school on Monday or Tuesday night if they're in the 7th grade. They'll play a JV game on Thursday night as a 9th grader. They'll then go play for their travel team on Saturday and Sunday.
So the travel's during the same season?
And they practice all summer long. It's crazy. It's crazy.
So they're going to 2 practices too?
No, they don't. Well, I don't think they practice during the week, during the season. I think the practice happens during the summer, and then
So the travel's just basically this team's recruiting
Right.
whoever they can to be able to put
Right.
on to be able to do.
right. And so I wasn't aware of how big a deal this was. And starting out, my mindset was, and I looking back, I think this was the correct approach because I needed to set the tone, was, I would have kids come to me because travel soccer was the worst. Travel soccer and travel baseball were the worst. Coach, I've got a soccer tournament this weekend. It'd be a Thursday. Soccer tournament this weekend. My coach said I'm not supposed to train the rest of the week. And in one instance, my question was, does your coach work here? No, sir. Then you're training. It's like I'm not modifying what you're doing for the betterment of the school's athletic program and your development based on an outside source that only views you as a dollar sign. I'm not doing that. And so when I kind of set that tone, a lot of that died down. Now, I would tell the groups, I need to know what you're doing outside of here because I am going to adjust what you're doing slightly day of if I know you've got something huge coming up. Kids you trust, right? Especially in the 9th grade, because the 9th grade year is a little weird developmental wise, because that seems to be the year the overuse injuries can really take off if we're not careful. So the travel stuff is still something I'm trying to navigate because it's never going away. It's only growing. I've had many meetings with dads and with parents about, my son wants to play Division I football, and I'd say that's great. He's got to get a lot bigger and he's got to get a lot stronger based on the position I think he's going to end up having to play. We probably need to quit playing AAU and travel soccer if that's our goal. If our goal is to play Division I football, our goal now is not to have fun. Our goal is to go get a scholarship. So everything we do needs to be based around getting bigger, getting stronger, maximizing our athletic ability, not having fun on the weekend with my buddies. So that's something that still is tricky to navigate. The multi-sport thing. So going in, I just had a sense that there was going to be a lot of multi-sport athletes, and I needed a really flexible training plan in order to accommodate that, because the last thing I wanted was football's got a program, basketball's got a program, baseball's got a program. I've got all 3 of these in the weight room at the same time. How am I going to manage this and keep the flow going in the room? Because one of my biggest pet peeves as a coach is training logistics and training time. I cannot stand just sitting around, wasting time, confusion, guys not knowing what to do. We're going to be efficient. We're going to maximize our time. I don't want to be in there long. They don't want to be in there long. I want it to flow really well. I want to get in, I want to get out. So we've got to have an airtight plan, which, is a whole nother thing I can go on. But with the multi-sport athlete thing in mind and wanting to minimize the amount of training programs we were going to have, I decided before I even got there, everyone's going to run the same program. Every athlete, every grade. Now, the difference is going to be middle school to high school, the movement selection is going to be different. So we're going to scale the intensity of what the middle schoolers are doing based on movement selection versus what the high schoolers are doing. The way we're going to manage the intensities and volumes of in-season versus off-season is we're going to undulate. We already undulate, but we're going to, because we undulate and we use 3-week waves, it's a lot easier to make micro adjustments versus working off a 12-week fixed plan. So what we do is week 1 for us is moderate volume, moderate intensity in the weight room. Week 2 is high volume, low intensity. Week 3 is high intensity, low volume. And then we just rinse and repeat that year round. Every sport, every age group, everybody. Middle schoolers are on different movements, regress movements within our progression system. Their lower body work for squatting, their front squatting or goblet squatting versus back squatting. With our 7th graders with our Olympic lifts, they're learning the positions. They may be doing high hang cleans versus our high schoolers maybe going from the floor, things like that, right? And all of their work is based on bar speed and perfect technique. It's not, slap as much weight on the bar as possible. But all of our sports, in season or off season, are working off that 3-week undulating wave. Difference being, our in season, it's a lot easier to back off intensity if we have a big game that week, right? So our 3rd week in this model, if it's there, we allow our kids to go for a training PR. If it's on a clean or a clean variation, we're doing 1s and 2s, our strength movements, our squats, presses, things like that. Bench, we're going off 3s. If it's there, they're able to go for a training PR. If it's not, it's just heavy 3s all the way through.
And that PR is going to establish what the next week. Because my question was going to be, how do you now? Because you're dealing with people going through puberty too, which have insane growth spurts.
Yeah. And so that is another reason I settled on this model, is because I didn't want to base just say 9th grader. I didn't want to base a 9th grader's training for the next 12 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, on a fixed number, because they're going to be stronger in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
Especially if they hit a growth spurt. I see it every day. So if I base all of their training off of, for the next 12 weeks, off a number, but they've gotten stronger after 4 weeks, we're wasting time.
Yeah.
Versus letting them see where they are every 3 weeks. If it's there, great. If it's not there, it's just a heavy 3-day. So that allows for a lot of flexibility within the plan, and it also allows for, like you said, they're going through puberty, they're growing, they're developing, whatever. And it could be they've gotten 10% stronger just because their technique has gotten better.
Sure.
They've finally figured out how to strain in a squat. They finally figured out how to be aggressive off the floor with a power clean, whatever it is, right? Or I finally got this kid to start eating breakfast, and all of a sudden he's gained 10 pounds. I mean, it could be, there's a million different reasons, but everybody operates off that plan, and it's been so easy to manipulate and make adjustments based on things that are going on, because stuff nobody tells you about going to the high school setting is we're probably not going to have school Monday and Tuesday because of winter weather. Well, if we're in the middle of a 6-week hypertrophy block, we've just lost 2 days. Well, next week for us is starting a new training cycle. It's 5's week for us, is moderate week. If we miss it, it's okay. We're going to get that again in 3 weeks' time. It's not a big deal. Or they're going to have a tutor 7th period because they're failing math. They can't come to a training session. And if it's 3's week, that's okay. They're going to get it again in 3 weeks. No big deal. They get sick. They got to go to the dentist. They got to go to the orthodontist. Whatever it is going on, it's easy to make those adjustments. Then in season, it's easy. We're playing our biggest rival and it's 8's week. That's fine. We just back the intensity off even more than it was already. We're able to handle it. We're able to recover. The following week, we're playing a team we're going to beat, 5 touchdowns at halftime. It's our heavy week. This is a great week to see where we are in the middle of the season. Hit a training PR if possible.
Can you have multiple sports in the weight room at one time?
We can, depending on the sport. Football, typically no, because it's close to 50 guys and 5 guys to a rack.
Right.
It just
so that's easy to manage what you're talking about.
Yeah, baseball and basketball I can usually combine. Now, granted, all of this would be really hard to do if I didn't have an assistant. That's another big thing about our school is they view what I do so importantly that it's not just me. It's you have an assistant as well, and if I didn't have him, this would be almost impossible to manage. But the way I do it and the way I'm going to describe this, I know is going to be, I don't want to say controversial, but a lot of people are going to look at it and be like, there's no way you can do it. But it works for me, and it's always worked for me. And there's reason behind it is we don't print sheets. We don't have fixed numbers the kids have to train off of. Everything is off the coach's eye. The kids don't put anything on the bar that I don't tell them or my assistant doesn't tell them. Everything is based on bar speed, technique, and RPE. I want to live in RPE, and I'm using RPE, just basically a scale 1 out of 10. If you want to use percentages, we'll just say 80 to 85%. I want to live in that range as often as possible, because that's generally, unless we're talking about strength sports, powerlifting, strongman, weightlifting, if we're talking about training for team sports, that's where the majority of your gains are going to be made, is in that 80 to, we'll call it 90% range. And the more often we can live in that, the better. Now, what that looks like is determined based on the rep range. So our strength movements week 1, 80% or 8 out of 10 difficulty level for 5 looks a lot different than it does for sets of 8 the following week. Looks very different than it does for sets of 3 the week after that. And I got to this kind of by accident, but a lot of the college stops I worked at, I was involved in return to play dealing with injured athletes. And when you're dealing with injured athletes, if they're going to be, modified for a long time, you've still got to get better during that period of time. And you've got to get creative how you do that, because they still have to strain. Their nervous system still needs a stimulus. So you've got to get creative with how you load things. And I was seeing that it didn't matter the injury that the athlete had or the kid had, as long as we were straining and we were living in that 80 to 90% range, their body was going to change. They were going to get stronger. And when they were able to go back to normal movements, they were stronger than they were before. And it was kind of eye-opening to me that, that range really is where progress gets made. Because
with that range, how much deviation are you allowing in technical breakdown? Let's use a squat for an example. I mean, a squat could be a fucking good morning.
Yeah, it depends on the age of the athlete. With our 7th, 8th, and 9th grade are 0.
Okay.
If it's not the way it needs to be done, we're lowering weight or we're modifying the movement. I mean, it's nothing.
That's techniques determining.
It's nothing to take a 7th grader off front squat, make them go to goblet squat.
Yeah, okay.
With our older kids, because puberty starts to set in and limb lengths start to change, all of those things, there's more of a variance in what the movement can look like based on how they are built, how they are developed, right? Because we've got guys with really long torso or really long legs or whatever else is going on. We got kids with incredibly flat feet. There's not everyone's squat or bench or clean, whatever, is going to look exactly the same.
Yeah.
We want to get them to where they look exactly the same, but there's still going to be degrees of variance in there. So with our older kids, there's a little bit more, I don't want to say technical freedom, but there's a little bit more wiggle room in there when it's appropriate. If it's in the middle of the off season and with football, for example, and it's 8's week or it's the middle week, and I think we just need to strain and strain hard. I'll tell my assistant before, like, I'm okay with a little technique breakdown today. I want to see us. I want to see us go get it with some weight today. It's a lot of reps. I want to see the mental strain.
Okay. All right. And so continue with where you were going before I interrupted.
So, yeah. So like that's basically,
so you want to keep them in that range.
Yes.
Right?
I want to keep them in that range as long as I can. And, prime example, I think of this is, or of the benefit of this style is it lets us train hard during the season, like really hard during the season. Our football team trains 3 days a week. They lift on Sunday, they lift on Monday, and they lift on Wednesday. So we get after it during the season. Our Sunday and upper body day looks exactly like it would during the off season. And that was one of the benefits of coming in with a blank slate is these kids don't know any different. If I was taking over for another strength coach, I may have had to adjust the approach because they may have been used to a certain way of training during the season. These guys weren't used to anything, so I was able to push the envelope. And, that day specifically, I looked at, these are high school kids. They recover in 10 minutes. We still need to be pushing the envelope and getting bigger during the season. I want our guys who need to gain weight at their biggest in the playoffs, not in August before camp starts, right? But use this past season as an example. We won a state championship, which that has minimal to nothing to do with me. That's the kids, that's the coaches. We were incredibly healthy, which I think part of that was the training and the prep that we did. But again, a lot of that's luck. A majority of that is the way we practice. We practice really hard, really short, really physical year round. That's the best preparer for competition is practice always. But the thing that I was really proud of was we had 4 opportunities throughout the season to hit a training PR in the weight room on power clean, squat, and bench. 4 opportunities for that threes week to hit a training PR. 100% of our kids hit a training PR on all 3 lifts at some point during the season. Now, it wasn't, the second 3-week wave, they all PR'd on that day. It was spread out, it was about 50 to like 60% or 40 to 50% of the team would PR on, an individual lift or multiple individual lifts that week. But 100% of our team, 100% of our guys PR'd all 3 lifts during the season at some point. So we got stronger as the season was going on. And it's really easy to preach to the team and build the culture of the team when you have things like that happen, because they see it when they're on the field. We're bigger, we're stronger, we're faster than these guys that we're playing, and pregame intimidation, visual intimidation is very much a real thing in high school football, and this past year, I really felt that we were on the giving end of that a lot this year versus when I first got there, we were on the receiving end of that. We were the ones intimidating people pregame a lot of the Friday nights this past season. And, from the minute I got there, I was constantly preaching confidence through preparation. You've got to remember your training. You've got to remember the things that we've done, how hard we worked, how hard you strained, the things that I put you through, how hard you went at practice, all these things. You've got to remember these things going into competition.
Hey guys, if you're enjoying what you're watching, make sure to take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe.
And I think this past year was the first year that we really got that. And it was really easy to preach that when you've got proof. 100%. Every single one of you are stronger now on your clean, your squat, and your bench than you were back in August.
Have you seen that carry over to their ability to forget failure quick?
Yes.
Because that's another big component of all sport.
Yeah.
Is you're going to fuck up.
Yeah.
But you got to forget.
A lot of that is I'm blessed. The head coach I work with is awesome and lets me do my job. And we meet a lot, and he values my opinion and I value his, and we're able to collaborate really, really well. And one of his, mantras from day one was, how do we respond? How do we respond to adversity when things go wrong? Because, he talks about all the time, games are lost more than they're won because of things you do and things you don't respond to correctly. And so with that, I try to build in situations in training that they're going to have to respond to. It's like I was saying earlier, when I first got to this spot, I picked shuttles for a reason. I want to see them screw up. Our conditioning in the summer on Wednesdays, our hardest day of the week, I will purposely ding us for stuff I just make up on the fly. They're going to hear this now, but, on the fly, because I want to see how we respond to it. I want to create healthy conflict. I want to see guys go at each other within reason, because we need to do it in the summertime so we know how to handle it during camp, so we know how to handle it during the season. Because if we don't handle it early on, we're not going to be able to handle it when it really counts.
What were some of the things with this current position that, now that you've been there for 4 years, you would tell yourself when you started that you didn't see coming at all?
It's tough because there's things that come to mind immediately where I think maybe I could have done this differently, but the end result was the end result. Would I really want to change that, knowing where we are now?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like one of the things was I probably came in way too hard. Yeah, I did. I was coming from the collegiate section. I'm coming from, working with the 82nd Airborne. I'm coming from the SEC. I'm coaching 7th, 8th, 9th graders. I probably came in way too hard, but we're a lot more disciplined now because of it. So that's a tough one. I think I think my expectations probably needed to be lowered. I let the uh, thought of like what I wanted the training to look like, at the end of say that first summer, influence what I thought I was walking into as far as like a preparation standpoint or a development standpoint. So the training may have been a little bit different if my expectations were a little bit lowered.
Let me reframe the question, because coaching and basically life in general is just dealing with shit over and over and over and over. Like it never stops. It's always coming from one area or another area, and it's our ability to kind of deal with it and move on. And we learn from that, from the experiences of that. So you learn those experiences, training yourself through powerlifting, through football, and all the other kind of stuff, and through coaching those different segments, right? It's always there. Like shit's always going to happen. Like if things are smooth right now, and if you've been around long enough, something's just right around the corner.
Right.
No big deal. You'll deal with it, right? It's going to suck, but you're going to deal with it. The question would be, had you started at the high school level, right, instead of these other levels, right? Because it's different shit that's coming from different levels, right? Those other levels could have better prepared you for the high school level, or an aspiring coach may be better off to start at the high school level and then try to, which doesn't work really well because that's not how the industry, but let's just say it could work that way.
Right.
And, which would be the better segment to be able to build the calluses for the adversity that you're going to face.
I think, I don't think jumping straight into high school in a perfect world is the way to do it, because I think being in college athletics teaches you, it doesn't teach you, it's just a reality of it, the pressure of winning and losing. And in high school, that's not really a thing. It kind of is, but it's not. But it enables you to create urgency within the kids about how important the training we're doing, like right now in this session, is. And that's something, if you've only been in high school, I don't think you truly can understand. I think being in the college setting, depending on where you've been, who you've worked with, who you've worked for, it can make it tricky for you then in the high school or middle school setting as far as teaching goes and patience levels. That's something I could have done a better job of, the patience side of things. Because you don't, I've heard Jim Wendler talk about this with you. Being the best beginner coach is an important thing. You don't realize how important that is until you get to the high school and middle school setting. You don't realize how important being able to teach is with this stuff until you deal with a seventh grader. They forget everything the minute they walk out the door. Every day they come to us is like the first day of their life. They're like a baby giraffe. They have no idea how to do anything. So your teaching skills and patience level are going to be tested. And so if you've worked for good people, if you've been taught well, and you've been in systems that are good, which I've been really blessed, some of the people that I've worked for who have taught me and mentored me, it's going to be a lot easier versus if you haven't had those things, and with this population I'm with now, you have to have some kind of system, because if you just go in there freewheeling with no set standards, and I'm not talking about showing up on time, shoes tied, not bringing your phone in the weight room. I'm talking about a system in terms of movement progression and regression and exactly what it is you're looking for within those movements. You're going to be in trouble, because if you think you've seen bad stuff as far as movement patterns go deal with some 7th and 8th graders in a weight room, because you have no idea. They're all over the place. There are things that I have seen that I didn't even think were possible. So you've got to be equipped to be able to handle that. And, if you've worked in some really good systems collegiately with really good, with coaches who really care about movement detail and the biomechanics of why we're doing things, how we're doing things, that's going to come into play when you get in the high school and middle school setting. You need to know why his knees are high-fiving every time in the bottom of a squat, and how to fix it on the fly and not spend too much time with him because you got 30 other kids going.
Well, I would think too that from a more global outlook, that if you're in the collegiate sector, you have certain guardrails. This is your responsibility, these guardrails. Then when you get to where you're at now, it's a lot wider.
Yeah.
The guardrails, like you're not going to deal with, I don't think so, you're not going to deal with the parents, of a collegiate Division I athlete. As that widens up, right? Your ability to filter that noise has to streamline down. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, and that's very true. When I first started out coaching, the guy I worked for, Zach Woodfin, he was really big on playing to your strengths as a coach, as an individual, but everyone's going to have a hand in everything. It's not going to be, you're the O-line, D-line guy, you're the speed guy, it's everyone needs to know how to do everything. So it was very broad, I think, the skills I was developing as a young coach, which was really beneficial. When I got to Liberty and I worked for Dom Szynski, he was very much the opposite in that this is your job. This is the only thing you focus on. I want you hyper-focused on this. I want to never have to worry about this, which I enjoyed because that's kind of how I'm wired anyway. And I was able to get, I think, in a year's time, a lot better at a few certain things. Now, both of these really helped me as I went on, and it really helped me now because dealing with middle school, high school athletes, you better know everything. And you better know, if you don't know something, you better know where to go to figure it out because it's not enough to know just training X's and O's. You've got to know nutrition. You've got to know recovery. You've got to know administrative stuff. You've got to know how to help a kid who's struggling in class and getting bullied and getting picked on. You've got to be able to mentor kids. It's everything you kind of do at the college level. It's just exploded and a lot more because I see these kids every single day. In college, you may see them 4 days a week, maybe 5. I see them every single day, no matter what. And I see them sometimes for 2 hours at a time. So you spend a lot of time around these kids. And middle school or just young male athletes are very impressionable. So they're going to latch onto your personality, good or bad. They're going to reflect how you are, good or bad. So you've got to have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted and have answers and solutions to the things going on. I loved what Phil DeRue said when he was on here about don't be the coach that has to outsource everything. That really comes into play and was really eye-opening to me when I got to this job. And I don't think I would have been really ready to handle it had I not worked for those two guys, because on one hand it was we need to be involved with everything for just a coach development standpoint. The other hand, it was I want you so well versed in your 2 or 3 things that you know them better than anybody basically in the country.
Yeah.
And also he knows everything going on to that level. He knows your jobs, his job, this guy's job, whatever, and if I had gone high school right out the gate, I would not have been ready for it.
Mm-hmm. So with those coaches that you just described, you gave a real brief summary of each one of those. How would your assistant give a brief summary of you?
Well, I hope
putting you on the spot.
Yeah. I hope, number one, he would say that I'm a good role model to the kids. I'm a good man. I'm a good person. The things I preach, I live. I'm big on that. If we're going to ask the kids to be a certain way socially, spiritually, emotionally, whatever, we need to model that. I would hope that he would say, I am consistent. I'm the same way every day. That's one of the things that I think is really important as a coach, especially in the setting that I'm in, because there are so many things going on in these kids' lives that if we are not consistent in the same way all the time, how can we expect them to be? So I would hope that would be one. Always trying to get better. Every coach that comes on here says the same thing, but I mean, it is real. If you are not actively and constantly trying to improve your craft and your process, you are falling behind, and that extends to the kids as well. It's like we were talking about with the skill development. If we're talking about just you as an athlete, if we're not trying to find ways to improve your skill set in whatever sport it is you play, we're falling behind, and I think that's something that we model. We're constantly reading, learning, studying, whatever, to get better at what we do to help you get better at what you do.
I agree with that, but the one part that I think that gets missed is the communication side, right? Because all the other stuff is fun.
Yeah.
Right. And very, very interesting, but you can have all that knowledge and all that information, but then you can't communicate it, to the kids, or read the kids, and there's nonverbal communication's a real thing. Obviously, that, and all those things kind of play into that. And with a lot of the coaches that I speak to, that seems to be, the weakest area that they focus on. It's like, this is my personality, fuck them, it's what it is.
Yeah.
Or they do try to broaden it, to be able to know that. But you kind of described it in just the way that you model and show up every single day, being consistent. That's not easy.
No.
It's not easy at all.
No.
But it's necessary.
Yeah.
Because as you said, you don't know what's going on in these kids' lives.
Yeah. And the communication piece, I agree with you, doesn't get talked about enough, because at the end of the day, if I cannot stand in front of the athletes and communicate what it is we're trying to do and how I want it done, we don't have a chance. I am a firm believer in this, and it sounds wrong when you just take it verbatim, but the most important person in the room is not the athletes, it's the coach. Because if the coach is not successful, the kids have no chance of being successful, right? If the coach does not know the program inside and out, as well as he knows his own name and doesn't know the kids the same way, they have no chance of getting better. And ultimately, they are the most important thing. But within that training environment, the most important person is the coach, because he's the deliverer of the product. And that delivery method, like you said, is the communication and the teaching side of things, and that's one of the things I'm so grateful for Coach Woodfin for, is even when I GA'd for him, or even when I interned for him, he gave me coaching responsibility. A lot of guys don't do that, especially for interns. They don't ever let them do anything. They're just basically a janitor.
Yeah.
And he let me coach and lead, drills and stations or whatever, basically, day one. And so I was working on that side of things right away. And, it just grew from there. My responsibility and everything, grew. And, pretty soon I was, leading recruiting talks, to the recruits we'd have in town and everything. And, it's like you said, if you're not comfortable talking to the athletes and can't do it in a clear, concise way, we're going to struggle as a coach big time.
Yeah. Were there any topics you wanted to go over I didn't bring up?
Yeah. One thing I thought about is, and I want to get your thoughts on this. It's really common, and I'm guilty of saying this. I say this when we have prospective students on campus that come by the weight room if they're an athlete, and I'm guilty of saying this, when I was in the college sector, and every coach has said this in some capacity, but it's really common to hear a strength coach say, well, we're not powerlifters. We're not bodybuilders, right? Mm-hmm. We don't train that way, right? And I get what they're saying, because I've said it, because if you don't know anything about training, it's, oh yeah, we don't want to train like that. If I don't know anything about any of this stuff, I want to train like an athlete because why? I need to move. You know, and my stereotype of a powerlifter or bodybuilder is this big stiff guy who can't move, right? But a lot of programs and coaches, I think, have kind of adopted this as a pillar of their program, right? And it's almost like a principle that they have, that we train like athletes, we don't train like powerlifters or strongmen or bodybuilders, weightlifters, whatever. But they don't have that mindset when it comes to speed development stuff, because their speed programming, their movement programming looks like very much like a track practice.
Yeah.
And so I've always thought this is kind of an ignorant statement, and reason being is, if we're looking at bringing up general athletic qualities through strength training, why am I not looking at the best in the world at those things and how they do it?
Yeah.
If a back squat is going to be, or just back up even further, if getting stronger is a goal and objective of our program, and we're going to use the back squat or the bench press to bring that up, who are the strongest people on earth? Well, it's powerlifters and strongmen. So why am I not looking then at what they do from a programming standpoint, a training standpoint, a technique standpoint, and then trying to implement some of that with my athletes?
Yeah. It's
Same thing with, like, if we're going to be Olympic-based program, who are the most powerful athletes, you know, relatively on earth? It's weightlifters, it's sprinters, it's jumpers at the Olympic level. We're going to use that. We do it with speed training, but for some reason there's a disconnect when it comes to the weight room. You know, it's like, if I could get all of my kids back squatting in a powerlifting legal manner to that depth with that much control, you know, that much intent, we're in a great spot. You know? But it's just, it's always kind of puzzled me why we take that approach when it comes to the weight room with specifics. When there are specifics in the weight room, we can look at those sports for influence and help, but we don't do that with other areas.
Well, I think it's, no, I get it. And I think this is such an interesting question in today's world, because in today's world, you can look at the athletes that do compete in powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman, Olympic weightlifting, and the buzzword now for a lot of them is they want to be like an athlete again. So this has gone full circle.
Oh, it swings back and forth
well,
constantly.
Because this has gone full circle, and if you have a strength coach that hears that, right, from one of those lifters, they're going to think, you can't train like an athlete. You need to do what the athlete does.
Right.
Like, you need to do the fucking practice. You need to do, that's why they're athletic, is not really so much because of what they do in the strength and conditioning. It's part, but they're really athletic because of what they do in their sport.
Right.
So if you want to be athletic, do their sport, right? If you want to use that power, now to take it back, if you want to say, you know, I don't want to be like the power, you know, we're not a powerlifting program. Well, you're not doing, to say that is the same thing as the power lifter saying, I want to be an athlete, but you saying, well, then do the fucking sport. You know, if you're going to say, you know, we don't train like power lifters, well, then don't do the fucking sport.
Yeah.
Right? Because the takeaway from both of these are, there are movement drills, there's mobility drills, there's exercises that those athletes do. Granted, they're all athletes, but those athletes do that might help the powerlifting, bodybuilding, strongman community. And they're going to use those, right? We've seen mobility all these things become a thing, which get pulled over from that. Right. In contrast, you know, if they're saying that, then don't squat ever.
Yeah.
Like, don't,
Yeah.
right? I mean, if you want to build the squat, then build the squat from the people that have done it with the highest loads, with the lowest injury risk. There is that, right? You need to look there too, like which program, which style, whatever biomechanically is going to be best for that, and learn how to build that. The other thing there is, to avoid not being the power lifter, then you don't do the peaking phase. You're still doing a strength phase. Even if it's conjugate or whatever it is, there's still a peaking phase, right? And no matter what the strength sport, the peaking phase, we can all argue before the deload, right, is the riskiest part,
Yeah.
Right. That's what I think they always talk about. We don't want to do that because they're taking those 3 weeks of that last heavy block.
Yeah.
And looking at that and saying, oh, it's not required.
Yeah.
Well, if your squat sucks, then you need to learn how to squat.
Yeah.
If your Olympic lifts suck, like why, I mean, how the fuck are they learning the Olympic lifts if they're not going back to the people that actually compete in those lifts?
Right.
Right. That's the thing that always confused me with that, because I'd hear the powerlifting, but then the Olympic lifts would be in the program, which is still debated, to this day.
Well, it's just the argument of where it's coming from. It's we don't want to ever make the weight room the main thing, which is not by default. The main thing is their sport. The main thing is not the weight room, and it's they're saying that to fight that stigma, and the stigma still of, it makes you big and slow and stiff and you can't move, and those things aren't trendy right now. And I just go back to if I'm going to use a movement, I want to look at the best people in the world at doing that movement.
From what I've seen is the coaches that have strong opinions like that are not, I never hear that from the coaches who are confident and secure in the programming that they're doing for their athletes. I've never heard it, right?
Yeah.
Never. I only hear it from the coaches that aren't. And so basically it's like hate on the internet, right? The people that are going to put hate out on the internet don't love themselves,
right,
or don't believe in themselves enough, because the people that really do believe in themselves and they're kicking ass, they're not going to bother,
right,
to make comments like that. The same thing would be here.
Yeah.
Another coach that just keeps criticizing somebody else's programs. I question how well they think their machine is.
Yeah.
Because if their machine is running and it's going really well, I've never seen it. So I never really give too much attention to that kind of stuff, because they're hurt people. I mean, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
It's just whatever, be you, man.
Right.
This is working for us. We're going to run with it.
Yeah.
And they can criticize, right? But if everything's making well, I mean, after a period of time, you're not even going to hear it.
Right.
It's like, dude, we just fucking won. Everybody's PRing. Say what you want. You suck. Right?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I think that pretty much sums it up.
All right. Any final thoughts you have?
No, I mean, I just, coming on here, I've been watching and reading y'all's stuff for a really long time, probably since the 7th grade. I went back just the other day and read the famous article about the secret West Side diet, the bulking diet, the pulling you out in the parking lot and swearing you to secrecy, just appreciate, really what you do and the stuff in the educational material that you put out. 'Cause, I certainly don't think I would be the coach that I am now, or even the powerlifter that I am now, without that. 'Cause it's been an enormous educational resource for a really long time for me.
No, I appreciate that. It means a lot, because the company was founded on the aim to live, learn, pass on. And because we've almost 30 years old now, I'm able to see people like yourself, which are doing that, right? You've built your own strength. You played ball, competing, and your coach. This is what this whole thing was set up for.
Right.
And there's going to be people that are going to come up under you, your assistant, who knows who's going to be in the future, that's going to go on, and they're going to coach and they're going to teach. Because there's a lot of lessons we all take from this weight room thing that are far more broad than PRs, sets, reps, and all this other stuff. And to me, that's always been important, to make sure that continues without paywalls and all this other bullshit, to make sure that the kids, a lot of them that you work with that couldn't afford, a private coach or all this other kind of stuff, can excel and take those lessons that we all learn and apply it to their life and just keep going through. So I thank you for what you're doing, because it's awesome.
Well, I appreciate it.
All right. We're done. All content you see on this channel and at EliteFTS.com is created by, take a guess, EliteFTS. If you want to help support the content, head over to EliteFTS.com and pick up literally anything that you need to be able to get more jacked and strong.